In a forest clearing, a monstrous demon stands over the fallen form of the hero. As chaos erupts, one guard screams for a retreat, questioning why a fellow gate guard isn't running. The young guard, however, remains calm, observing that they haven't even reached the main story yet. He's the mob soldier who, through extensive game knowledge, became the strongest but now seeks to hide his true strength. Dismissing the unfolding crisis as unimportant, he lunges forward to intercept the demon. This world he now inhabits is that of an RPG called Brave of Asterisk, or Brias. In that game, players assume the role of the hero, Alan, fighting demons and forging powerful bonds with friends. It was a game he was obsessed with before he was reincarnated into it. His previous life ended abruptly. He had died from overwork at an exploitative company. He considers himself lucky to have been reborn into his beloved Brias, now living his life as a simple gate guard in the capital, Silencia. As he reflects, a voice calls out his new name, Silva. An older guard named Maud tells him it's time to switch shifts. Silva agrees, thinking to himself that while it's a shame he wasn't reborn as the hero Alan, this new life isn't bad at all. As he leaves, Maud reminds him to pick something up. He walks through the bustling town, feeling content. Compared to the swamp of work in his previous life, being a gate guard who gets paid even for slacking off is practically heaven. He approaches a street vendor to buy his usual. As he strolls, his attention is caught by a nearby scene. A merchant is aggressively trying to sell a sword to a young woman, insisting it's a high-quality piece that he'll sell to her cheaply. The woman politely explains that she isn't a swordswoman, but Silva recognizes her immediately. It's Charles Orland, an important character who becomes a friend early in the game. A wave of excitement washes over him. She was his favorite character. The merchant continues his pitch, claiming the weapon is a holy sword blessed by the king of the fairies, powerful enough to make even a novice strong. Internally, Silva knows the man is lying and scoffs at the attempt to fool Charlie, though he admits her naive side is quite cute. Seeing her in the flesh, so undeniably adorable, is an overwhelming experience. He feels a profound sense of gratitude for his death and reincarnation, thanking God for this very moment. He watches stunned as another young man with spiky hair calls out from across the plaza, telling Charles to wait. The newcomer strides forward and points at the merchant, confidently declaring that the sword is a fake. Silva recognizes him instantly. It's Alan, the protagonist of Brave of Asterisk, the player's avatar. Seeing him in person feels strange, especially knowing that according to the story, Alan is destined to become Charles's lover. Alan then offers to walk Charles to the castle gate, as she is on her way to collect herbs. She agrees, and they depart together, leaving Silva standing alone in shock, muttering her name under his breath. As he gloomily watches them go, the merchant approaches him, insisting he shouldn't believe what Alan said. The man then offers to sell him the sword at a cheap price. The merchant continues his pitch, claiming that with this sword, even an ordinary person can become a hero. The words catch Silva's full attention. His expression hardens slightly. He reaches out, his hand stopping the merchant's own, and calmly declines the offer. He explains with a gentle smile that he is just a gate guard, and a regular sword is more than enough for him. His simple refusal leaves the merchant baffled. The older man calls him a strange fellow and turns away, muttering that he should try to sell the sword to someone else. As the merchant leaves, Silva's resolve solidifies. He is not the hero. He is nothing but a background character, a mob. That role belongs to Alan. This conviction comes from his past life. He remembers being swamped with work, and how playing Braz was the only thing he could truly enjoy. That memory reinforces his desire for a simple life now. He continued to reflect on the world he now inhabited. While he found all the characters of the story charming, his favorite was, without a doubt, Charlie. He smiled to himself, content with the knowledge that if everything went according to the original scenario, Alan and his comrades would save the world from the demon threat and bring about an era of peace. With a burst of pure excitement, he clenched his fists, realizing he wanted to see that epicness come true with his very own eyes. His mind raced, formulating a plan. This was a dangerous world where demons attacked humans constantly, so survival required strength. He decided to utilize his game knowledge to that end. His personal strategy in such games was always to reach the maximum level in the very early stages, ensuring an effective and safe path forward. He was quick to clarify to himself, however, that this didn't mean he wanted to replace the protagonist, Alan. He was someone who always respected the source material. Using his knowledge to his advantage simply meant choosing an appropriate place where he could practice hard for many years and raise his status to the maximum levels. He would never forgive someone if they were to change the original story, even if that person were him. Just watching the scenario play out from afar was good enough. His reverie was broken by the return of his colleague. Maud was back. Silva's face brightened instantly, his hands clasped in delight as he exclaimed that original works were the best. A confused Maud looked at him, asking what on earth he was talking about. The older guard chuckled, dismissing the odd comment. He suggested they go for a drink once they were done with work. Silva eagerly agreed, giving a thumbs up and declaring that nothing beats a beer after a shift. Laughing heartily, Maud noted his subordinate's excitement and asked if something good had happened. Before he could answer, a desperate cry for help pierced the air. Silva whipped his head around, wondering what was happening. His eyes widened at the sight. A monstrous, spider-like demon had appeared within the city walls, hissing with menace. Maud stared, frozen in terror. As other guards scrambled to react, Maud turned to his partner. "What was that, Silva?" he asked. Silva, shaken, instinctively muttered the name of the event, the Wedge Day. He quickly caught himself, stammering that it was nothing. But his mind knew exactly what it was. The Wedge Day, an event that happens once a month before the main story truly gets rolling. It was a time when demons, who normally never work together, would cooperate to attack the kingdom. According to the game's script, no significant damage is done in this event, and the hero swiftly exterminates the demons. But as the attack began, Maud, the senior guard, bellowed orders at his men to tighten their formation. They were to hold the line until the hero arrived. The creature, a mere level 1 demon, was not overwhelmingly powerful. However, it was still too strong for a regular soldier to defeat. Silva watched as his comrades struggled, their blades failing to make a significant impact on the beast. He considered that taking the demon out himself wouldn't be that hard, but he was reluctant to drastically alter the scenario. He resolved to simply do his duty as a gate guard and hold it off. His thoughts were cut short as Maud cried out in pain, struck by the creature. Silva's gaze hardened as he wondered when the hero was finally going to show up. Instantly, Silva was at his side, asking if he was okay. Maud waved him off, insisting it was just a graze. But when Silva turned back, the demon had vanished. Clenching his fists, he cursed the creature for daring to harm Maud before running away. Watching the uncharacteristic outburst, Maud was taken aback. He wondered himself if Silva had always been that fast on his feet. Meanwhile, far from the chaos at the city gate, Charles Orland rested by a peaceful stream while Alan played in the water nearby. Having finished collecting herbs, she decided it was time to regroup with Alan and began pulling on her boots. Her movements paused as a sudden rustling from the nearby bushes caught her attention. Peering into the dense foliage, she called out, asking if someone was there. Silva dashes through the woods, pursuing a foe. He notes its incredible speed and considers trying to cripple it by cutting off one of its legs. Suddenly, his eyes widen in shock. He skids to a halt, his gaze fixed on Charles Orland, standing in a clearing ahead. He is stunned, wondering what she could possibly be doing there. His mind races as he struggles to compose himself. He knows with a strange certainty that Charles isn't supposed to be here, that this deviates from the game. A wave of panic hits him as he realizes her life is in danger, a fate she is not meant to suffer. His fear is realized when a monstrous, dark-skinned demon with white hair materializes behind Charles, raising a clawed hand to strike. As she cries out in terror, Silva roars a challenge, drawing his sword and vowing that the creature will not lay a hand on her. He lunges forward, unleashing a powerful technique, Zalencia's sword style, spinning top. In a blur of motion, his blade carves through the demon's torso, intercepting the attack just as Charles falls backward. The demon's body slumps to the forest floor, defeated. Silva sheathes his sword, the immediate danger averted. Nearby, Charles sits on the ground, covering her mouth in relieved shock. With the threat gone, he turns his full attention to Charles, his expression softening with concern. She looks up at him, her cheeks flushed. A mixture of gratitude and relief is playing on her face. He rushes to her side, his composure breaking as he frantically asks if she is all right and if the demon managed to injure her. Charles, still flustered, reassures him that she is okay. He stood frozen, the adrenaline fading, replaced by a sudden, dawning horror. He realized he had just acted completely out of turn, blurting out, "Oh, shoot. I've gone and done it." His flustered state was interrupted by Charles, who asked who he was. Misinterpreting the question, he reflexively answered that he was just a gate guard. With a gentle smile, she clarified that she wasn't asking about his profession. She wanted to know his name. She leaned closer, her expression earnest as she pleaded, "Please, tell me your name." The directness of her request left him looking away, a blush creeping up his neck. The unexpected turn of events was overwhelming. His life, this entire scenario, was veering wildly off course. Charles's voice cut through his thoughts as she thanked him, calling out his name. He finally managed to reply, stammering, "I am Silva." While on duty at the castle gate, Silva has a moment of panic. He realizes he has just made contact with Charlie. He quickly turns to a nearby woman, explaining that he has guard duty and must be going. His mind races with anxiety. He recalls that he had no choice but to defeat a demon in front of her, and now he worries this action might influence the plot in some unforeseen way. As he frets, his superior, Maud, calls out his name. The older guard informs him that he has a direct summons from the captain of the elite Holy Guard. Stunned, Silva questions if he heard correctly, asking if Maud truly meant the captain. He offers a grim smile, stating that while he doesn't know what kind of trouble Silva has gotten himself into, he will take care of his funeral. Silva pleads with him not to say such ill-omened things. Maud laughs and apologizes, but adds a serious warning. The captain of the elite Holy Knights Order is known to be extremely stern. He hopes Silva gets off with just a scolding. Soon, Silva arrives at his destination, the imposing headquarters of the elite Holy Knights Order. Inside, two fully armored knights escort him through the stone corridors. One confirms that everything is in order and directs him forward. As he follows, a bead of sweat forms on his temple. He looks up with determination, thinking that he must do everything in his power to avoid meeting her. Meanwhile, in an office lined with bookshelves, a woman in ornate armor stands reading a report. She is the captain of the elite Holy Knights. She stares at the report in her hands, her eyes widening in disbelief. Through the window behind her, Silva could be seen approaching the office. With a sudden, explosive burst of energy, she slammed her hands forward, shattering the window glass with a bright, welcoming smile. As the door rattled shut behind him, Silva stepped inside. The captain welcomed him warmly by name. He took in her appearance: lustrous silver hair, blue eyes as deep as the ocean, and a physique he recognized as one of the best in the game. He identified her immediately. Elda Snow White, captain of the elite Knights Order. To him, she was also a conquerable love interest in the world of Bryas. He cautiously asked if she needed him for something. With a pout, she called him a thick-headed guy, asking if he truly didn't understand why he was there. A sudden, dreadful realization struck Silva. For some reason, Elda knew about his true abilities. The fact that she had specifically called him over gave him a very bad feeling. His fear was confirmed as her expression hardened. Leaning forward, she asked him directly, "You're the one who took out the demon, right?" Silva flinched, startled by the accusation. He tried to play dumb, asking what she meant. Elda elaborated, referencing the demon attack from the other day and a report about a demon's corpse that had been found completely ripped apart. She continued her logical takedown, stating that the demon showed traces of being defeated by a technique called spinning top. Excluding the hero, the only person capable of such a feat was the captain of the Holy Knights Order, who wasn't present. She locked eyes with him, demanding to know who else could have possibly done it. Silva was left speechless. Elda leaned back, declaring it was time for him to face the facts. A person with his level of skill, she insisted, should dedicate himself to serving the country as a knight. He deflects the accusation, pointing out that she specifically excluded the hero from her line of questioning. He wonders aloud if it's possible the hero was the one who defeated the demon. Internally, however, a single thought consumes him. If he were to confess, his peaceful life would be utterly ruined. Captain Elda taps a finger on her desk, dismissing his theory as naive. She explains that the hero is duty-bound to report all demon suppressions to the country, yet the defeat of the spider remains officially unknown. Leaning forward with an intense smile, she declares that she won't stand for it and demands he come to terms with the situation and join the Knights Order. Her expression contorts with shock and disbelief at his continued refusal. She demands to know how he can still deny it. From across the room, Silva retorts that she has no solid proof for her claims. Frustrated, she questions why he is so vehemently against the idea of joining the Knights Order. She begins listing the benefits: a handsome wage and numerous other perks from the country that would far surpass his current station. He concedes her point, but explains his reservations. As a knight, he will be forced to take on missions, his primary role being to back up the hero and protect the country. The thought of such a responsibility gives him mixed feelings. Continuing, he states plainly that he doesn't want to get close to the main characters. When Elda asks what he means, he quickly dismisses it as nothing, though he internally reaffirms his conviction. He has absolutely no plans to become a knight. Her expression hardens. She calls his reluctance a crying shame. Realizing that persuasion has failed, she concludes that she can no longer afford to be picky about her methods. As she rises from her desk, a bewildered Silva can only look on, questioning what she means. Silva stares in shock at a document thrust before him by the elite knight captain. It's a letter of admission, bearing a signature he vehemently denies writing. He recoils, realizing she's gone too far. He thinks to himself that as the captain of the Knights Order, she could easily get away with such a forgery. Her menacing demeanor vanishes in an instant. She dismisses the letter, claiming it was just a joke and that she can't force people to join without their consent. She then presents him with a rolled-up scroll. He takes the new document, asking what it is. The captain explains that she will give up on inviting him to join, but in exchange, she needs him to do her a favor. The paper shows a sketch of an unfamiliar man. She identifies the man as Brajo Bertoli, an applicant hoping to pass the entrance trials for the Knights Order. With a hardened expression, she states her request plainly. She wants Silva to stop him from joining. He recognizes the surname, asking if Brajo belongs to the incredibly famous Bertoli family. The captain confirms that he does, but her tone is laced with contempt as she calls the man an irredeemable scumbag. She explains the predicament. Because Brajo is a noble, she can't simply fail him in the trials without facing pressure from the higher-ups. This, she points out, is where Silva comes in. She lays out her plan. Silva will fight Brajo in a mock battle during the entrance trials. He is to defeat him soundly, convincing everyone that Brajo is unfit to join. Silva realizes with a start that she's using him for sabotage. He considers the proposition, then asks for confirmation. If he stands in for her and does this favor, will she truly stop trying to recruit him into the Knights Order? Her expression brightens into a wide, confident smile. She assures him that is the deal, stating that she is counting on him. Within the stone walls of the capital's fortress, a new and troublesome task weighed heavily on one of its guards. He trudged through the streets, sighing in frustration. They had given him one hell of a bothersome job. He considered the delicate balance of his predicament. Brajo was a character who wasn't supposed to be significant, yet he still had connections to the Knights Order. Any misstep on Silva's part could have unforeseen consequences, altering the course of events. This realization solidified his resolve. Brajo didn't factor into the main events, but Silva knew hardly anything about him. He would need to gather information. He steeled himself, determined to keep his contact with the main characters to a minimum. He vowed he would not screw up like that again. Just then, a light tap on his shoulder broke his concentration. Startled, he spun around to see a familiar face smiling at him. It was Charles Orland, who called out his name, Silva. His immediate reaction was panic. He insisted she shouldn't be meeting with him, then quickly backtracked, stammering that he was, in fact, happy to have met her. The memory of their first encounter, when he had steeled his resolve, flashed through his mind. She, however, was undeterred by his awkwardness. She reminded him that he had run away right after saving her, and that she had been looking for him ever since. He tried to explain, claiming he had some pressing matters to attend to. His excuse felt flimsy even to him. He covered his face with his hand, offering a sincere apology for leaving without a word. Charles watched him, a thoughtful expression on her face as she simply said, "I see." Then, her expression sharpened as a crucial question occurred to her. "By the way," she began, pointing a finger at him, "why do you know my name, Silva?" The unexpected question made him flinch. He feels a pang of guilt for lying to Charles. Thinking fast, he fabricates an explanation, claiming he was assigned to guard nobles at a party and happened to see her name on the list of attendees. She listens intently, her expression unreadable as she asks if that is truly the case. He can only manage a hesitant "okay" in response. At his reply, she puffs out her cheeks in a playful pout, clearly not entirely satisfied with his stiff demeanor. She tells him that she understands, but insists there's no need for him to be so uptight and polite with her. As he begins to protest that he can't simply do that, she interrupts, stating that she wants to thank him for what he's done. He becomes flustered, dismissing her thanks by saying he was simply doing his duty as a soldier. Unswayed, she insists, declaring that she will do anything for him and will even help out with his work. She then reveals her true intention. She is conducting an investigation and wants his help. With a strained smile, feeling he has no other choice, he agrees. In the capital city of Zalencia, Silva and Charles arrive in the bustling red light district. This area is known to be frequented by members of the Bertoli family, one of the most prominent noble houses in the country. They meet with an informant, who explains that because the family is so popular, it was easy to gather information. She relays the rumors circulating about them. They've secured immense leverage with the royal family through large donations, but are also said to be involved in human trafficking and dealing illegal drugs. Absorbing this grim news, Charles glances towards Silva with a faint blush as they walk through the crowded streets, drawing stares from the locals. He believes that, according to the information he received, their target should be somewhere in this area. Noticing her silence, he turns to her and asks what's wrong. Her face flushes a deep red. Covering her mouth with her hands, she shyly asks him just where he plans on taking her. His eyes widen in shock as he realizes her implication, and he frantically insists she has it all wrong. Seeing his reaction, she giggles, admitting she was only kidding, and expresses her hope that they find this Brajo fellow soon. As it turns out, their target Brajo is known for being a wastrel. He squanders his parents' money, buying copious amounts of alcohol every day and wandering about in a drunken stupor. Walking down a quieter alley, Silva wonders aloud where a man like that would usually stay. Charles confirms that she knows he is in the red light district, but speculates that they may have arrived too early. At that exact moment, a loud growl erupts from Silva's stomach. He flushes with embarrassment, mortified that his stomach would betray him in front of his companion. Apologizing, he sheepishly asks Charles if she is hungry and wants to grab a bite to eat. He agrees, deciding they should look for a restaurant with tasty food. Charles admits she's starving too, and her eyes light up as she points toward a nearby establishment, noting a good smell coming from it and suggesting they investigate. Her suggestion proves fruitful. Inside, Charles takes a large, satisfying bite of a hamburger, her expression one of pure enjoyment. As she eats, Silva watches her, a look of surprise on his face. He recalls reading that she, a noble, loves hamburgers, but finds the reality of it unexpectedly charming. His observation continues as Charles looks downcast, lamenting that it's a shame she can never get a good bite. Silva muses that it can't be helped, given how small her hands and mouth are. She stares at her meal, considering the problem. After a moment, she decides it's not so bad, since she still gets to eat the bun. With this realization, she takes a delicate bite of just the bread. Silva understands now. This must be how she usually eats them. He is utterly captivated by the sight, feeling that her cuteness is so overwhelming he might just pass on to the afterlife. After their meal is finished, Charles thanks him for the food. Seeing that it's gotten late, she asks where they should continue their search. He explains that since the red light district becomes dangerous at night, he plans to continue the investigation by himself. His words are cut short by a loud slam on their table as someone shouts for attention. The source of the interruption is a menacing group led by Brajo Bertoli himself, flanked by armored guards. He sneers and demands to know if there are any spare tables on the second floor. He had a reputation for causing trouble. Just the other day, he had snapped that the food was taking too long and threw a glass. He was also known for forcing himself on girls and flirting with them. This arrogance was on full display as he bellowed at a waitress, questioning how they could have no spare tables. He announced his own name, Brajo Bertoli, as if his mere presence should grant him entry, while his female entourage looked on at the packed restaurant. His demands escalated. Dismissing the waitress's apologies, he sneered, asking if she knew who his father was. He insisted that if they had no spare tables, they should simply make one for him. Observing the commotion from their table, Charles confirmed to Silva that it was indeed their target. She remarked that he was every bit the utter dirtbag the rumors claimed, as Silva listened intently. Having apparently shoved the waitress to the floor, Brajo scoffed, calling the staff useless trash. He declared he would simply find another restaurant. As he began to turn away, Charles caught Silva's attention. She leaned forward with a thoughtful expression. Well, she began, a hint of recognition in her voice. Could it be that you are? Before she could finish, Brajo loomed over their table, his gaze fixed solely on her. With a wide, unsettling grin, he addressed her by her full name, Miss Charles Orland. Silva watched him, his expression guarded. He leaned closer, attempting a friendly tone, urging her not to be so cold and claiming they had met at a noble's party recently. Charles, however, showed no recognition, asking if they had met before. Her failure to remember him sent him into a rage. His face contorted as he menacingly asked if she was truly saying she didn't remember him. Charles closed her eyes, trying to recall, but admitted she couldn't. Her eyes then snapped open in alarm, a bead of sweat on her brow. His face contorts into a malicious sneer, his eyes wide with fury. He clenches a fist, his voice dripping with venom as he leans in. If her memory is truly so fuzzy, he promises he will take his sweet time to ensure she remembers him. Inside a tavern, the nobleman Brajo brutally recoils with a look of profound disgust, while the young guard, Silva, stands before him with a cool, determined expression. Recovering his composure, he leans towards Charles Orland, dismissing their current location as a dingy tavern. He offers to take her to a high-class restaurant instead, explaining that her beauty is famous even in high society and that he wishes to get to know her better. His proposition is met with a blunt refusal from Charles, who states she is not interested. Nearby, Silva's face twists into a strained, angry smile, finding the man's shamelessness unforgivable. She repeats her disinterest, but Brajo persists, offering to treat her to exquisite food, liquor, and luxurious fruit juices. With an exasperated sigh, Charles points out that she is not yet of drinking age. The repeated rejections finally cause Brajo's charming facade to crack. His eyes narrow with contempt as he glares at her, thinking of her as a mere wench. His attention then shifts to Silva. He points a finger at the guard and asks Charles if this is her bodyguard. Before she can respond, Silva steps forward and confirms it himself, stating that he is indeed Lady Charles Orland's bodyguard. He thinks that this declaration will give him the perfect justification to protect her if Brajo makes any unwanted moves. Taken aback by his sudden declaration, Charles averts her gaze, a faint blush on her cheeks as she stammers out an agreement. The confirmation sends Brajo into a fit of hysterical laughter. He scoffs at the idea that a man with such a common-looking, mob face could ever serve as a bodyguard for a noble. As the nobleman mocks him, Silva grits his teeth, a wide, menacing grin spreading across his face as he entertains the thought of simply cutting off the man's head. He continues his insults, condescendingly asking if Charles's family is suffering from a shortage of manpower and offering to lend her one of his own bodyguards. Silva's expression darkens, a wave of guilt washing over him as he realizes that his presence is the reason Charles is being subjected to this public humiliation. With a menacing laugh, Brajo gestures to his own retinue. He boasts that they are all elite bodyguards, former members of the Holy Knights Order, handpicked by his family. He presents the four imposing, heavily armored men as proof of his status, asking if they don't perfectly fit the role of serving him. As they walk away from the confrontation, Charles tells Silva it's time to go. He, however, is lost in thought, muttering his disbelief that former members of the Holy Knights Order would sell themselves out to someone so pathetic. His boisterous laughter cuts through the air, causing Charles to glance back with a puzzled expression. Brajo mocks them, expressing his hope that they'll make it back to their mansion safely with such a wimpy-looking bodyguard. In response, a confident smirk plays on her lips. She turns and declares that Brajo's bodyguards don't even hold a candle to him. Once they are further away, she apologizes to Silva, admitting she got angry when they made fun of him. He is surprised, stating he never imagined she'd get upset on his behalf and that it feels like a blessing. He then suggests that provoking them might have been a good idea, asking if she needs something from them, though she doesn't immediately understand his meaning. He realizes this is the perfect opportunity to gather information on Brajo. Just then, they are confronted by the nobleman's guards. The lead guard states they want to put Charles's boast to the test. She gives him a sidelong glance, a silent understanding passing between them as they face the armored men. Turning his attention back to the guards, Silva calmly accepts their challenge. The lead guard grins, replying that's what he'd like to hear. With a sharp crack of his knuckles, he issues a demand. They will tell him all of Brajo's wrongdoings. A heavy thud echoes as the guards, suddenly terrified, immediately capitulate, crying out that they will tell him everything. He listened, his eyes widening in disbelief as the terrified guard began to speak. The man, sweating and trembling, admitted that Brajo's misdeeds were extensive, stating there was even more to tell. He recounted a litany of crimes, selling counterfeit drugs, blackmail, and physical assault, confirming that the nobleman was, in his own words, one hell of a scumbag. One of Brajo's men holds Silva at knife point, revealing his master's plan. After passing the entrance trials, Brajo intends to find leverage on the captain to seize complete control of the Knights Order. He understands Brajo's intent is to make the order subservient to him, a move that would endanger the townspeople and allow corruption to fester throughout the country. Silva realizes he must intervene to stop this plot. Now standing over the defeated guards, he tells them he won't report their loss. He instructs them to return to their master with a fabricated story of their victory and to never speak a word of what truly happened. As he deals with the aftermath, Charles Orland approaches, calling him Silva. She remarks that no ordinary soldier could have done what he did, easily wiping out a demon, and asks him directly how he became so strong. He turns to her with a wide smile, cheerfully explaining that it was tough training. For many years, he says, he has been hiding out in the mountains. He elaborates that the place was crawling with monsters, and he nearly died every day, which is how he grew so strong. Seeing Charles's concerned expression, he quickly reassures her that she doesn't need to resort to such dangerous methods. He smiles warmly, betting his life that Charles will get stronger without such hardship. Touched by his conviction, Charles replies that if he feels that way, then she will trust him. Having settled things, they walk off together. Silva announces that he's hungry and suggests they find somewhere else to eat, prompting Charles to ask if he's treated. Later that night, a tower is silhouetted against the starry sky. Charles's voice can be heard, confirming that of course she will treat him, as all nerds are duty-bound to treat their favorites. The day of the entrance trials for the Knight's Order arrives. It is announced that the 127th trials will begin with the first exam, a mock fight. One-on-one fights will be conducted by lottery, with the winners advancing. Holding a notice, Silva steals his resolve, determined to stop Brajo from making the order his own. He hadn't expected to meet his target so soon. Brajo Bertoli pointed a gauntlet finger, recognizing him as the dull-looking bodyguard from before. Silva, unfazed, offered a simple greeting, surprised to see Brajo there as well. The nobleman sneered, remarking that he could say the same. He revealed that his bodyguard had reported the outcome of their encounter, and that they were supposed to have beaten Silva soundly to teach him a lesson. Yet, he observed, Silva didn't look injured at all. With a knowing smile, he explained that he had simply gone to the church for a healing potion. It had cost him a fair bit, he admitted, before adding a pointed remark about the idea of Brajo struggling to afford one himself. Brajo erupted in fury at the insult, scoffing at the mere mention of a healing potion. He gestured grandly to his own gleaming armor, boasting that it was top-shelf equipment forged from extremely rare orichalcum. Just then, an official voice called out both their names, summoning Brajo, Bertoli, and Silva to the center of the training grounds. The realization that they were to be opponents sent Brajo into a fit of derisive laughter. He declared Silva an unlucky fellow, unable to believe his good fortune. Silva simply acknowledged the situation with a calm, "You're right, Sir Brajo." Turning to the trial examiner, he inquired about the consequences of killing an opponent. The examiner stated plainly that such an act would result in disqualification. A look of mock relief crossed Brajo's face as he turned back to Silva, telling the mob soldier that he had narrowly escaped. With a cruel grin, he decided to proceed. "Well then," he snarled, before lunging forward with his sword raised, roaring, "Here I come." The charge was cut short. With a barely perceptible flick of his finger, Silva sent Brajo's sword clattering out of his grasp. Brajo stared in disbelief, stammering in confusion. Silva casually remarked that his hand must have slipped, adding that Brajo had made a narrow escape. He then wondered to himself if a strong blow would be enough to kill the man, even with his armor. He then proposed an idea. What if he were to attack Brajo in the same manner? Flustered, Brajo retorted that his own initial charge was merely a handicap, a way of letting Silva have the first move. He insisted that now, he would grant Silva the first attack. With a confident grin, Silva accepted the offer. He pointed out that Brajo's arm had gone numb, rendering him unable to swing his sword anyway. Then, in a blur of motion, he struck. The impact sent Brajo flying across the training grounds, tumbling through the dust. He stood over his defeated opponent, who scrambled to save face by shouting that he had simply tripped. Silva coolly observed the pathetic excuse. He calmly remarked that it did, indeed, look like Brajo had tripped. This only enraged his opponent further, who retorted that he had yet to unleash his full power. Brajo, seething, accused him of surviving on pure luck and announced his decision to finally end the match, a fight he claimed he never wanted in the first place. As the sword began to gleam, Silva simply watched from across the arena, acknowledging the threat. In response, he placed a hand on the pommel of his own sword. A soft light emanated from the blade as he quietly invoked a magic enhancement. This technique was a fundamental application of magic, the channeling of one's inner mental energy. When applied to the body, it could make a person as durable as steel. When infused into a weapon, it could make a simple sword sharp enough to slice through iron with ease. His mind drifted to the reason for such power. Demons, the ancient enemies of humanity, possess bodies far tougher than any mortal. To stand against them, to become a true hero, required the free manipulation of magic. It was a power that many people live their entire lives without ever sensing, let alone wielding. Silva calmly identifies his opponent's armor as being made of orichalcum, noting that without it, their bodies would be no match for him. An overwhelming pressure emanates from the guard, causing Brajo Bertoli to sweat and tremble. He stammers, questioning Silva's sudden change in demeanor and asking what he's trying to pull. He smirks, reminding Sir Brajo that he is the one who is supposed to be attacking. After all, he points out, one cannot win a duel without launching an attack. Brajo recoils in terror, accusing Silva of planning to kill him. He concludes aloud that some low-ranking nobles must have hired the guard for a paltry sum. The term bottom feeders causes Silva's expression to harden instantly. His confirmation that Brajo was speaking about Charles makes the nobleman flinch. Brajo internally remarks on how different Silva seems, as if he's become another person entirely. Staring into Silva's eyes, Brajo becomes convinced that the guard genuinely intends to kill him. In a desperate panic, he changes tactics, offering to hire Silva himself with his own money. He continues his plea, promising vast sums of money, more than Charles could ever pay, and even offers women if Silva will just yield. Unmoved, Silva simply asks if he is ready, warning him not to move if he values his life, causing Brajo to cry out in fear. Brajo makes one last, desperate offer of fine women, even better than Charles. This proves to be a grave error. Silva's face twists in fury as he roars for Brajo to shut up and to never say her name again. His rage boiling over, he leaps forward, unleashing a powerful technique, Zalencia's sword style, White Waterfall. His blade flashes through the air, striking Brajo with incredible speed and force. The attack connects with a sharp clang. Brajo can only stare in stunned silence as a clean cut appears across his chest plate, the metal pieces beginning to separate and fall away. With a final thunk, the severed armor clatters to the ground. Brajo cries out in disbelief, unable to comprehend how his armor, forged from orichalcum, could have been destroyed. In the center of a stone arena, Silva stands over his defeated opponent, who slumps to the ground and stammers out his surrender. Silva confirms the yield, then lets out a quiet sigh of relief. With this, his mission was accomplished. All that remained was to report back to Elda. Watching from the stands, Elda allows a small, satisfied smile to cross her lips as she declares his victory. Beside her, a fully armored guard can only stare in stunned silence, muttering Silva's name in disbelief. The growing murmur from the audience draws his attention. He glances back at the stands, his expression shifting to one of alarm as he takes in the chattering crowd, a sense of dread washing over him. A sudden, worried thought strikes him. He might have drawn far too much attention to himself. Inside her office, Captain Elda sits at her desk with a satisfied expression. She addresses the guard before her, stating that thanks to his efforts, they have successfully prevented Brajo from joining their order. She continues, her eyes closed in quiet resolve, promising that they will gather solid proof of Brajo's vicious deeds to ensure he is thrown in jail. His wrongdoings, she declares, are unforgivable, as she offers her thanks to Silva once more. His expression hardens with determination. Clenching a fist, Silva tells the captain that he is counting on her. Elda then reminds him of their promise. It's time to make Brajo pay for insulting Charlie. She then informs him that, because he helped in foiling Brajo's plans, she will no longer invite him to join the Knight's Order. His face immediately lights up with a wide, relieved grin. He expresses his sincere appreciation, overjoyed that his peaceful days will finally return. Elda looks on, a little surprised, realizing he is being completely serious about not wanting to join. Her surprise quickly turns to disbelief, her eyes welling up with tears. She presses him, asking if he is really, truly sure. Without a moment's hesitation, Silva confirms that he is absolutely positive, not interested in the slightest. Her composure shatters completely. Slamming her fists on the desk, Elda erupts into a tearful tantrum, shouting that he should work for her as a knight and demanding to know why he won't, crying that she wants him by her side. Silva is stunned, realizing this is a completely different form of promise than what he'd imagined. He watches her cry, thinking to himself that he hadn't anticipated a spoiled brat Elda event would occur. Sighing, he remembers his need to keep his promises and offers her a handkerchief. She accepts the cloth, sniffling her thanks and promising to wash it and give it back. As she wipes her tears, she grabs his arm and pleads with him to at least continue to do his job well as a gate guard. Having extricated himself, Silva walks away alone, deciding he will make sure to lay low for the time being. Behind him, two other guards watch him go, one remarking that he looks like a common mob character, completely different from what they've heard. He overhears a conversation between two other guards. One mentions another demon sighting, the third this month, leaving Silva with a look of quiet concern. This news troubles him. Looking out over the city from his post, he sighs, bothered by the increase in demon activity and wondering if it has something to do with the main story he feels is about to begin. He sits down, feeling that he's drawn too much attention to himself recently. He can only hope that these new developments won't affect the plot in any significant way. He muses that since Alan is the protagonist, a happy ending for this world is practically guaranteed. His mind briefly pictures Alan as a triumphant, heroic figure. His thoughts are shattered by a sudden, loud slam nearby. He whips his head around, startled, as a bead of sweat forms on his temple. He throws up an arm as something lands with immense force, kicking up dust and debris. Through the haze, he sees a woman smiling down at him, realizing with a start who it might be. The figure is revealed to be a woman in an ornate, dark outfit, a sheathed sword at her side. She looks down at the stunned guard on the ground. "There you are," she says, addressing him by name. "Silva." She then introduces herself with a confident smile. "Special grade hero, Kagaya." Her dramatic arrival immediately draws a crowd. Onlookers begin to chatter amongst themselves, recognizing the famous Lady Kagaya and wondering what a special grade hero is doing there. As Silva tries to sneak away, hoping to keep his contact with main characters to a minimum, Kagaya leans in close. Darling, she whispers, a sly look on her face. I've been looking for you since forever. Before he can react, she suddenly wraps her arms around him from behind in a tight embrace. Where are you running off to and leaving your dear wife behind? She asks, as the flustered guard silently screams for help. Still held in her embrace, he listened as Kaguya introduced herself. She declared that she was a conquerable love interest who had appeared out of the blue, and more importantly, the only hero to ever be granted the title of special grade. She boasted of her exceptional skill with both magic and sword, so powerful that she had once ripped a level 4 demon apart while laughing. In essence, she proclaimed, she was humanity's ultimate weapon. She then leaned in closer, calling herself a true monster. More critically, she revealed that, just like Elda, she was aware of his true abilities. This knowledge, she explained, was why she had become so fixated on him. Despite acknowledging that Alan was supposedly his soulmate, Kaguya was convinced that fate had brought them together instead. Overwhelmed, he tried to change the subject, suggesting she forget about him and focus on her duties as a hero. He pointed out that demon activity had been high recently. She immediately dismissed the idea, stating that such duties held no interest for her. Being with him, she insisted, was a far more charming prospect. His eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't fathom how someone with her title could be so dismissive of her responsibilities. As he tried to protest that he had no memory of them ever becoming a married couple, she simply zipped closer. She declared that of course she was allowed to be with him. After all, she was his wife. While she excitedly planned their wedding ceremony, he felt as though he were talking to a brick wall, though a small part of him admitted the offer was tempting. Unfazed, Kaguya suddenly suggested they visit an interesting cafe she'd found to spend some quality time together as a couple. Before he could properly respond, she grabbed his arm and began pulling him away, his protests about their marital status completely ignored. Meanwhile, at the Holy Knights Order headquarters, Elda reviewed a report at her desk. Her expression soured as she read the news. The Holy Knights had once again failed to capture the cursed demon. She stands in her office, her thoughts consumed by a single name, Silva. Frustration boils over as she reflects on a past failure, convinced that if only he had been with them, the outcome might have been different. With a sharp crack, her fist strikes the desk. Following the outburst, she moves to the window, crossing her arms as she gazes out at the city below, lost in the memory. Her eyes land on a small, folded wallet left on the windowsill. The object brings him back to the forefront of her mind. He was a strange one, she thinks. Even now, in such a difficult situation, she finds herself inexplicably expecting him to do something extraordinary. Her mind flashes back to a chaotic battlefield. A knight's desperate cry rings out. The hero has been taken. The statement, the worst that could be uttered in battle, was understandable given the overwhelming number of enemies. As a massive, horned demon held the fallen hero, she took command, ordering everyone to fall back while she bought them time. She knew reinforcements had already been called. Kaguya was on her way. But having sustained an injury, she wondered how long she could possibly hold out. With some time, still before Kaguya's arrival, she resolved to fulfill her duty and minimize the damage by thinning the demon's numbers herself. The fight was grueling. She thought that if they had been mere level 1 demons, she could have handled them, even with her injury. Against level 2 demons, however, it was a tall order. A sudden, sharp impact sends a jolt of pain through her body. A demon's clawed limb stabs deep into her side. Gritting her teeth against the agony, she steels her resolve, declaring internally that she has no intention of sacrificing herself for free. A faint light begins to glow from her armor. She lunges, unleashing a sweeping attack that slices across the horned demon's chest. The creature simply grins, unfazed. Ignoring the beast, she dashes past, desperate to reach her comrades. But the demon roars, telling her it's not so fast. It leaps through the air to intercept her, a terrifying sight against the backdrop of her knights, cowering in fear. She remembered him clearly from that day. He wasn't a knight in shining silver armor. Instead, he wore battered steel and simple shoes. Yet he was the one who stood and looked the demon straight in the eye. As she began to shout a warning, he cut her off, stating that they hadn't even gotten to the main event yet. With that, he charged forward, swinging his sword and shouting incomprehensible gibberish. Elda could only watch, thinking his effort would be meaningless. But Kaguya, who was also there, saw it differently. Elda recalled the way he looked at that moment, thinking he was by far the most beautiful of any knight she had ever seen. The memory faded. Back in the present, Elda explained to Silva that ever since that day, she had incessantly asked him to join the Holy Knights Order. Yet, she noted with a hint of frustration, he always denied himself the opportunity. She grabbed him by the collar, her voice filled with conviction. She told him that she felt he had been given a power specifically to protect this world. The next day, Elda arrived at the scene of an attack. A knight on duty greeted her, expressing surprise that she had come in person. The knight reported that there were 2 victims. He explained that it seemed to be the work of a cunning demon, as there were hardly any traces left. He concluded that they would need to call for Sir Hero. She confirmed that she had already asked him to come, but since they didn't know anything about their target, they were prioritizing the investigation for now. She ordered the knight to continue his report, and he acknowledged. She continued, stating that both victims were women. They had bite marks, and it seemed their blood had been drained. Considering the lack of any other traces, He estimated the demon was probably over level 3. Elda's face hardened as she took in the grim news, thinking how awful the situation was. The scene before her was one of utter devastation. Bodies lay strewn across the floor in a tangled heap, their clothes ripped and faces locked in silent screams. A grim testament to the demon's brutal attack. Clenching her fist in frustration, she turned to the knight beside her. She ordered him to relay a message to the other knights and to summon gate guard Silva to the knight's orders headquarters. Her voice then rose, putting all holy knights and soldiers on high alert and commanding the scout regiment to expand its range of search immediately. Flanked by armored guards, Kaguya leans in close to Silva, expressing her excitement for their first task together and calling him darling. Visibly flustered, Silva demands she stop using that phrase. He inwardly laments the situation. Yesterday was already difficult with Kaguya following him around, and now he's been assigned to investigate the demon attack. He feels he's gotten himself into a messy fix. The scene shifts to several hours prior. During a briefing with the elite knight captain, Elda, Silva asks her about a vampire, and she confirms his query. She clarifies that vampire is a popular alias being used for the culprit behind the demon attack that occurred the other day. Continuing her report, she informs him that there were 2 victims. Their corpses were discovered completely drained of blood, with distinct bite marks on their necks. Back in the present, Silva wonders aloud what Kaguya is doing there. She snuggles up against his arm, declaring with a smile that she does as she pleases and that it has nothing to do with the captain, who watches them with a stern expression. In a swift motion, Elda slaps Kaguya's hand away from Silva, shouting for the lascivious wench to get away from him. She pushes Kaguya back, repeating her demand. Unfazed, Kaguya calmly points out that she was merely linking arms with him. Kaguya calls the captain uptight. Elda furiously retorts that she is in the middle of a serious conversation. She collects herself, muttering seriously under her breath before stating that they need to get back on track. She began to lay out the details of their target. The culprit behind the demon attack was likely an evolved bloodbat, a creature capable of shape-shifting into a human form. This ability explained why it hadn't been located yet. Furthermore, its power level was estimated to be over 3. She turned to Silva, noting that a level 3 demon would be a difficult opponent even for skilled knights. With a determined look, she declared that this was his time to shine. The weight of the task settled on him. He saluted sheepishly, expressing his doubts. He was just a gate guard, he argued, honestly believing he was only capable of running errands. Elda, however, was unconcerned, explaining that they were currently lacking manpower and would appreciate his help with the investigation, even if he acted independently. Her offer to let him act independently gave him pause. He stared at the 2 women with a suspicious gaze, prompting Kaguya to ask what was wrong. After a moment of hesitation, he clarified that he had a question he needed to ask first. His eyes narrowed, his stare intensifying as he looked directly at Elda. He bluntly asked if she had any ulterior motives for giving him this assignment. The question caught her completely off guard. She erupted in flustered laughter, waving her hands dismissively as she denied everything. Of course, she wasn't trying to set some grand plan in motion. It certainly wasn't her hope that by helping with the investigation, he would earn the respect of others, which would in turn make it easier for her to officially invite him to join the Knight's Order. As her nervous laughter continued to fill the room, he stood silently for a moment before dryly pointing out that she had just blurted out every single detail of her supposed secret plan. He sighed, understanding her intentions now. He explained that while he normally couldn't refuse an order for a simple investigation, he would accept this one. Before he could finish, Kaguya suddenly appeared at his side, cheerfully announcing that if he was helping, then she would lend her aid as well. The unexpected declaration left him speechless. The captain slammed her hand on the desk in protest. "Wait, Kaguya," she yelled, insisting that her involvement would ruin the entire plan. Kaguya, however, was completely unfazed, stating that she didn't care about the plan. She simply wanted to accompany Silva. The captain could only groan in frustration. She let out a frustrated sigh, but ultimately relented. "All right," she conceded, admitting they could use all the help they could get. Looking at them both with renewed authority, she instructed them to attend the upcoming investigation meeting where they would be briefed on the entire situation. Silva knocks on the heavy door before pushing it open. He steps into the room, announcing their presence, with Kaguya following closely at his side. Their entrance immediately draws the attention of the assembled knights, and a wave of hushed chatter ripples through the room. The men whisper amongst themselves, questioning who the unknown soldier is, but their focus quickly shifts as they recognize the woman with him. Murmurs spread, wondering why a special great hero like Lady Kaguya would be paired with a mere soldier, concluding it must be Captain Elda's orders. Kaguya, however, simply closes her eyes, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips as she basks in the attention. The whispers echo through the spacious briefing hall, where a large, round table awaits the attendees. Silva and Kaguya stand together, a noticeable distance from the other knights who continue to gossip amongst themselves. In the briefing room, Kaguya approaches a table occupied by several knights, including a startled Silva. With a bright smile, she asks if she might sit with them. Silva stammers his approval, and she thanks him, taking seat. She leans forward with a playful glint in her eye, chuckling that they are certainly standing out. Internally, Silva corrects her, thinking to himself that she is the one drawing all the attention. Once everyone is settled around the large circular table, The knight in charge announces that the investigation meeting regarding the vampire attack will now commence. He begins by summarizing the known facts for the group. They need to organize what they know, starting with the two victims, both in their 20s, whose corpses were discovered in the northern part of the capital. As the grim details are shared, Maud curses the wretched demons responsible. Beside him, Silva listens, a realization dawning on him. This particular attack case never existed in the main story of Brias. He processes this new information, concluding that if this is a deviation, it means the main characters won't be joining the fray, and the case will likely resolve itself on its own. This thought brings a wave of nervous relief over him. He glances sideways at Kaguya, only to see that she has her eyes closed, apparently having dozed off during the briefing. He quickly recalls the conclusion of the meeting. In short, they will expand their search range and establish a night patrol. He and Kaguya have been put in charge of the Eastern Gate. With their new orders, he turns to his partner, cheerfully announcing that it's time to go investigate. He calls her name, but then realizes with a start that she is still completely fast asleep. He stares at her sleeping form, a look of utter disbelief on his face as he mutters, seriously. He approached a large, stern-faced knight, offering his assistance with a nervous smile. The knight looked down at him, his expression severe, and demanded to know which group he had been assigned to. Upon hearing Silva's answer, the knight erupted in frustration, questioning Captain Elda's judgment. He couldn't understand why a special-grade hero would be paired with a common soldier from the Eastern Gatesguard Regiment. He then furiously declared that Kaguya was supposed to team up with his unit, the Second Holy Knights Order. The motive became clear to Silva. The man was trying to poach the hero to steal the credit for himself. The knight leaned in close, his voice a low growl, warning Silva about his insolence. Unfazed, Silva calmly stated that the decision was not the knight's to make. His anger rising, the knight gestured towards the sleeping Kaguya and ordered Silva to withdraw from the investigation immediately, declaring it far beyond the capabilities of a simple soldier. As Silva began to explain that he was following direct orders from the captain of the First Holy Knights Order, the man lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar. He snarled that they were the Second Holy Knights Order and had no regard for the First Authority. A subordinate watched nervously, sensing his leader was going too far. He shoved Silva backward, roaring that as esteemed members of the Second Order, they could not tolerate being outdone by the First in any manner. Suddenly, his subordinates began to tremble, urgently trying to warn their leader of a presence directly behind him. A cold voice cut through the air, telling him to be quiet. The knight paused, a bead of sweat on his brow, and glanced back in confusion. Standing atop the table, her eyes glowing with fury, was Kaguya. She remarked on the knight's audacity for laying a hand on her darling. As a dark energy swirled around her, Silva, now released, watched in astonishment, pleading for her to calm down. She moved in a blur, her sheathed katana flashing out. The weapon slammed against the Second Order leader's armor with a resounding crack. Silva, caught completely off guard by her sudden, violent intervention, could only cry out her name in disbelief. The force of the blow sent the massive knight crashing to the floor with a heavy thud. Standing over his defeated form, Kaguya held up a hand, her gaze icy as she issued a simple, non-negotiable command to the stunned onlookers. Stay back. With a satisfied smile, Kaguya clenches her fist as the knights who accosted them lie defeated on the ground. She scoffs at their audacity, remarking on the gall they had to lay their hands on her husband. Silva stares in disbelief, questioning if she, a special-grade hero, truly just said that. Kaguya turns to him with a playful wink, apologizing for not holding back. He can only look on, stunned by her swift action. As they walk away, he tries to address her sudden use of magic, telling her it's bad for his heart. She, however, seems lost in a daydream, sighing contentedly about how romantic a night patrol is. She turns to him with a bright smile, justifying her actions by asking if it isn't only natural for a wife to protect her husband, especially since their assailant had attacked him. He concedes that she saved him, but mutters that she went too far. With a smug grin, Kaguya ignores his complaint, instead asking for praise for having protected him. She notices his unenthusiastic expression, pointing out that he looks doubtful. Silva can only respond with a weary sigh. Kaguya insists that she isn't lying about her love for him. She lists the things she loves, his tendency to take care of people, and how fun it is to tease him. Her expression softens into one of genuine affection. Chief among all, she confesses, is his true strength that he keeps hidden from others. She loves all of that about him. He looks away, doubting that a chance for him to go all out would ever come. Leaning in close, Kaguya gently pokes his cheek, telling him she wants to see it someday. She then floats into the air before him, a small smile on her face. She muses that responsibility is part and parcel of being strong, though she feigns ignorance about it. Below her, Silva is left to ponder her words, quietly repeating, responsibility. He stood with Kaguya under the night sky as she gazed upwards. She called his name, directing his attention to the brilliant full moon and remarking on its beauty. His eyes followed her gaze, taking in the sight. He agreed with her assessment before asking a question of his own, wondering about her origins. Kaguya turned to him, her expression serious, and posed a hypothetical. If she were to claim she was born from the moon itself, would he believe such a story? The question stirred a painful memory within Kaguya. She recalled a time when she was just a child, chosen as a vessel for clandestine research aimed at harvesting the moon's magic. Shadowy figures had watched her, one of them knowing her true nature. This power, drawn from the moon, had transformed her into the strongest, but it had come at the cost of her tears. Snapping back to the present, her hypothetical question was met with an immediate and sincere answer from Silva. Without hesitation, he confirmed that he would believe her, catching her completely off guard. Her surprise gave way to a warm, relieved smile. She laughed softly, pleased that he believed her, and offered a quiet thank you. He then explained his reasoning, suggesting that believing she came from the moon would simply make the idea of her more romantic. His unexpected explanation left her speechless. The word romantic echoed in her mind, and she stood frozen, a blush creeping up her cheeks as she tried to process his comment. Her composure broke entirely. Flustered, she pointed at him, declaring that he was finally being sheepish, and playfully accused him of emotional abuse for teasing his wife in such a way. He calmly, and very directly, reminded her that she was not, in fact, his wife. His own blunt correction seemed to catch him by surprise. He trailed off, a sudden realization dawning on him that his choice of words felt misplaced. His internal thoughts were cut short as a strange scent drifted through the street, his expression hardening with suspicion. He and Kagaya stood alone in the quiet alleyway, the unfamiliar odor putting him on immediate alert. The scent was immediately followed by a piercing scream from deeper within the city. Silva turned, calling Kagaya's name, as she confirmed she'd heard it too. As they began to move toward the sound, a chilling recognition dawned on him. He knew this scent. Before he could voice his realization, Kagaya suddenly faltered, a pained growl rumbling in her throat as she clutched her midsection. Her face contorted in agony and disgust as she identified the source of the foul odor. It was, she hissed, the filthy scent of demons. In a dark alley, Alan and Kagaya come upon a grim scene. A hooded figure looms over a fallen knight. Outraged, Alan demands to know what they are doing as he draws his sword and dashes forward. The assailant moves with unnatural speed, leaping onto a nearby wall and bounding away into the night. Watching the figure escape, Alan curses his momentary hesitation. He immediately turns his attention to the victim, rushing to her side to check her condition. Kneeling down, he is relieved to find that the elite knight captain is still breathing. He looks to Kagaya, asking if she can take the captain to the medical office. He declares his intention to go after the demon. She doesn't mind, but she questions if he can manage the pursuit by himself. He confidently tells her not to worry and to leave it to him. With that settled, he activates a skill, his body glowing with power. He announces magical enhancement as he leaps into the air, bounding across the city's rooftops under the full moon. His eyes scan the darkness, quickly locking onto his target. He's found him. He pushes his speed, dashing across the rooftops and shouting for the figure's stop. The assassin is incredibly fast, but Alan is closing the distance. Suddenly, the assassin's cloak dissolves into a swarm of flapping creatures. Alan stops in his tracks, startled by the sudden appearance of a horde of bloodbats. He lunged through the swarm, cutting down the bloodbats as they descended upon him. Grunting with effort, he found a sheer number of them to be an incredible nuisance. As he fought, he wondered if this cursed demon could truly command its own minions. Unseen by Alan, another young man observed the battle with a knowing look, identifying the technique as Zalencia's sword style. He put the style into practice, unleashing a powerful wild thrust that tore through the bats. The hooded figure recoiled in surprise as Alan, eyes locked on his target, declared that he had finally caught up. The hooded figure's expression tightened, a flicker of annoyance crossing its concealed features. Ignoring Alan's pursuit, the assassin turned to flee as the remaining bloodbats swarmed him once more. "Wait," he yelled, his frustration boiling over. Realizing he had no other choice, he drew upon his power, causing his sword to radiate with a brilliant light. The dark-haired swordsman lets out a cry as he swings his blade, but the hooded assassin dissolves into a swarm of shadowy, bat-like figures upon impact, a sharp stabbing sound echoing through the alley. He watches as the last of the figures, a single bat-like silhouette, flies across the full moon. Standing alone, he sheaths his sword, realizing with frustration that his target got away. His duty for the night concluded, he makes his way to a local clinic, its windows casting a warm light into the darkness. Inside, Kagaya greets him, asking if he returned empty-handed. The swordsman, sitting on a bench, apologizes for letting the creature escape, but confirms he saved a life with something called hemenitic. Kagaya then inquires if he sustained any injuries. He looks down, admitting it was a mistake to give chase alone. Kagaya tells him not to beat himself up over it. Hearing her words, he looks up with a small smile, expressing his relief. She reasons that if the creature could evade him, no one else would have stood chance. Her attention then shifts to a scrap of dark fabric in his hand, suggesting it could be a lead. He examines the cloth, his resolve hardening as he vows to catch it next time. Kagaya beams, finding his renewed motivation lovely. Flustered by her praise, the swordsman turns away, sheepishly asking her to stop. As they leave the clinic, he considers their predicament. The search for the demons has been fruitless, possibly because they are being protected. He concludes that these starved demons will likely strike again soon, and they must be stopped before there are more casualties. He looks up to find Kagaya perched on a nearby rooftop, humming a tune. He calls up to her, explaining that his only lead is the piece of cloth stained with the demon's blood. Staring up at her, he decides to take a chance on a long shot, asking Kagaya to try and smell the cloth. He held out the piece of cloth, asking if she could trace the demon with its scent. He reminded her of her previous claim to be able to recognize such smells, but Kagaya could only stare back, bewildered. She clarified that while she was sensitive to the scent of demons, her nose wasn't so sharp that it could be used for tracking. She bristled at the implication, stating firmly that she was not a dog, even as he insisted he was counting on her. Her words deflated his hopes. He slumped in frustration, muttering his disappointment that his brilliant idea had amounted to nothing. Seeing his dejection, Kagaya's expression shifted entirely. With newfound, fervent determination, and a pair of cat ears suddenly atop her head, she declared that if it was his wish, she would do anything to fulfill it. She proclaimed it her duty as a wife, offering to become a cat or even a dog for him. Her zealous offers escalated, promising to lick his shoes or even take off his clothes. Flustered by her intensity, the swordsman, Silva, shouted for her to stop, insisting he would be the one to apologize. Their frantic exchange was interrupted by a new arrival. Charles Orland, calling out to Silva, asked what they were doing. She explained she had been looking for him, proudly announcing that she had aced her written exams. He gave her an enthusiastic thumbs up, genuinely impressed by her achievement. Kagaya, however, watched the newcomer with a sharp, competitive gaze. She quietly asked who this young woman might be, and Silva immediately sensed a rivalry brewing. Charles was surprised Kagaya didn't recognize her, explaining that she was a student at the Heroes Academy. Silva quickly interjected, introducing Kagaya as his friend, an assertion Kagaya hesitantly confirmed. The name, however, sparked recognition in Charles, who suddenly realized she was speaking to the renowned special grade hero. She was taken aback, internally noting that a mere hero candidate like herself was leagued below someone of Kagaya's stature. Composing herself, Charles told Kagaya she sounded full of potential and that she was honored by their conversation, a rare event that Silva watched with excitement. With a flustered expression, Charles Orland confronts Kagaya, her hand nervously touching her lips. She bluntly asks what sort of relationship Kagaya has with Silva. Kagaya smirks, questioning if Charles thought Silva was single. She then dramatically proclaims herself to be his wife, the most fragile, demure, and beautiful in the world. This declaration sends Silva into a panic, as he realizes with dread that Charlie is now being drawn into the rivalry. He is momentarily relieved at the prospect of clearing up the misunderstanding, but the shock that Charlie is also becoming jealous quickly takes over. Turning to Charles, he wonders where he should even begin his explanation. She eyes him skeptically, asking if they are merely business partners. He hastily confirms that Kagaya is just a friend and that they are currently business partners, insisting that her claim of being his wife is entirely self-proclaimed. He continues, explaining that they are scheduled to go on patrols together due to the recent string of vampire attacks. At this, Charles's interest is piqued. She mentions that news of the vampire case has been circulating at the academy and declares that she would like to help as well. Kagaya interjects with a condescending smile, questioning what Silva's friend could possibly do. Annoyed, Charles retorts that she can be of help, confused by Kagaya's pointed emphasis on the word friend. To prove her worth, Charles claps her hands together. A brilliant light erupts from the ground around her as she issues a command for her master to appear. In response to her call, the spectral form of a massive wolf materializes behind her. "Fenrir Wolf," she cries out. Kagaya watches, a look of genuine interest on her face, recognizing the summoning spell as a fascinating piece of magic. The summoned wolf licks her cheek affectionately. Charles explains that her elemental magic allows her to summon her contracted spirits at any time. She introduces the creature as Fenrir, a wolf spirit she calls Ruru for short. As she stood beside her newly named spirit, Silva remarked on the cuteness of the name Ruru. He observed that elemental magic is considered an omnipotent skill, invaluable for both combat and reconnaissance. The wolf simply let out a soft bark in response, catching Silva's attention. She explained that Ruru has been her companion since childhood. Silva found this incredible, confiding that the spirit is usually wary of everyone but her. Reaching out a hand, he was amazed as the wolf's spirit allowed the touch. He realized the significance of the act, recalling that even Alan could only pet Ruru after his bond with Charles had reached its absolute peak. The spirit responded with pure delight, rolling onto its back. As Charles cooed at the cute display, Silva happily obliged, rubbing the wolf's belly. Kagaya, however, was not met with the same warmth. The wolf spirit stood its ground, growling defensively at her. She puffed her cheeks in annoyance, privately thinking it a rude animal. Charles simply chuckled, explaining that this guarded behavior was normal. Silva was the exception. Elaborating on her spirit's practical skills, she stated that Ruru can sniff out and track demons. Once the wolf has a scent, finding their target becomes a simple task. Silva immediately saw the potential, asking if Ruru could follow a demon's trail using the smell from a piece of cloth. Putting the theory to the test, she held out a piece of cloth for the wolf to smell. Ruru sniffed it intently before letting out a sharp bark, its head snapping upwards as it caught the trail. Charles noted the immediate reaction, realizing her spirit had found something. With the lead secured, Silva turned to his companions. After getting acknowledgments from both Charles and Kagaya, he gave a decisive command to pursue their quarry. At night, before a pair of wooden structures, a small group stands in the shadows, preparing for their next move. The group stands ready. The Fenrir wolf, Ruru, takes the lead, followed by Charles, Kagaya, and Silva, all observing their target under the starry sky. Kagaya breaks the silence, asking Silva for the plan and whether they should all infiltrate. She then turns to the wolf, asking, "Rue, does the small one come off from there?" The beast lets out an enthusiastic bark in response. Charles, however, voices her concern, asking if just the two of them will be all right. Silva dismisses the idea of a full infiltration, declaring that only he and Charlie will go inside. He instructs Kagaya to stand by outside. She challenges his decision with a pointed look. She reminds him that despite all her trouble, he still ended up letting their target get away last time. He acknowledges her point with a confident smile. "I know," he says, explaining that is precisely why he wants her to stay outside. He then explains his reasoning more clearly. Her power is a bit over the top, and she's not suited for fighting in close quarters. He states that Riru and Charlie are needed for the infiltration, and it's necessary to have someone keeping guard outside. Her expression softens at his words, a blush spreading across her cheeks. She murmurs that he knows her well. Suddenly overcome, she floats into the air behind him, arms spread wide in a dramatic pose. She declares how happy she is, wondering if this feeling is love, before quickly adding, "Of course not." Silva looks on, stunned, while Charles and Riru watch impassively. From her elevated position, she formally accepts a role. She announces that she will follow his instructions in order to respond to his love. Inside the building, Silva lays out the final step of the plan. With a confident expression, he assures his companions that he won't let a single threat get past him. He then turns to Charles, stating his intention to have Riru take the lead, a suggestion the wolf spirit greets with an enthusiastic pan. He smiles, impressed by the wolf's eagerness, thinking how dependable Riru is. The spirit responds with a sharp bark, ready for action. His attention then shifts fully to Charles, instructing her to stay behind him for her own safety. She looks up at him, a faint blush on her cheeks. With the formation set, they venture into the dark, cavernous interior of the structure. Sword in hand, Silva steals his expression and signals for them to move forward. They proceed cautiously down a wooden corridor, with Riru at the front, sniffing the air for any sign of danger. The tense silence is broken by a sudden thump as Charles stumbles, startling Silva, who turns back in surprise. She quickly apologizes, her face flushed as she clutches the front of her coat. She explains that she just got a bit scared. Her words cause Silva's heart to pound. He blushes intensely, thinking to himself that it's understandable for her to be anxious, as she is still just a student at the Heroes Academy. But Charles's fear was a pretense. As she squeezes the fabric of her coat, she thinks to herself that Silva is her favorite heroine, wondering if she is dreaming. The quiet moment is shattered. Silva's attention snaps forward as he asks Riru what's wrong. The wolf spirit has stopped dead, growling and barking fiercely into the darkness ahead. He scans the darkness, wondering if the threat is here. Putting himself between his companion and the potential danger, he instructs Charlie to stand back. She complies without hesitation as Riru continues to stare intently at a closed door ahead. From the shadows, a cloaked figure emerges, its face obscured by a deep hood. As it rushes forward with a strangled cry, Silva's eyes widen in recognition. He is certain he knows that robe. The assailant grabs his arm, but then throws itself past him, landing hard on the floorboards. It immediately spins around and lunges again. The bizarre, almost clumsy attack strikes Silva as peculiar. Something feels slightly off, but he can't be sure if it's just his imagination. The hooded assassin lunges, its sharp claws outstretched towards Silva on the floor. Unfazed, the young guard steels himself, resolving to unleash his Alencia's sword style to end the fight here and now. With that resolve, he springs into action, swinging his blade in a powerful rising arc. He shouts the name of the technique, upper slash, as it connects with the assassin, sending debris flying. The force of the blow sends the assassin crashing to the ground with a heavy thud. Silva, breathing heavily, looks on in disbelief at the sudden outcome. As the defeated figure lies motionless, Silva can't help but wonder if his foe was supposed to be so weak. His thoughts are interrupted as Charles Orland appears in a nearby doorway with Fenrir, cautiously asking if he managed to take the assassin down. She approaches, remarking that it was an incredible slash. Silva, looking away with a slight blush, dismisses the praise, insisting it was nothing that amazing. As he speaks, a faint rustling sound catches his attention. Charles notices his distraction and asks if he hears something. He confirms that he does, and they agree to find the source of the sound. Moments later, Charles spots something in the darkened corridor ahead. Over there, she exclaims, pointing the way for Silva and Fenrir. She leads them toward a stack of large crates, from which the rustling and creaking sounds are emanating. They cautiously peek around the edge of the crates. Their eyes widen in unison at the sight before them, as Charles begins to speak in disbelief. Behind the crates, the shocking discovery is revealed. A group of women, bound and gagged, huddled together in distress. They moan weakly, struggling against their restraints. Silva and Charles stare at the scene, horrified. He wonders aloud who these people could be, his expression a mixture of shock and concern. Suddenly, a bright voice cuts through the tension. The elite knight captain, Elda, appears with a beaming smile, loudly congratulating Silva on a job well done. He turns, surprised to see his commander, only to be smacked on the head. Elda expresses her impressed astonishment that he not only defeated the monster, but also rescued the captives. Annoyed, Kagaya interjects from the side, reminding the captain that she was also present. With a dismissive click of her tongue, Elda turns to Kagaya, offering a curt acknowledgement that she did a great job as well. Kagaya offers a simple thank you, her expression still betraying her irritation. The captain then announces her plan to report to the higher-ups that Kagaya, Charles, and Gateguard Silva have safely resolved the vampire incident. With a strained smile, Silva quickly asks her to wait a second. He leans in closer, quietly pleading with her not to mention that he was the one who took down the vampire. He explains his desire to avoid attracting any undue attention. Elda looks at him, puzzled by the strange request. Her confusion gives way to a sly grin. She asks what harm could come from his exploits being known, adding that it would just give her another reason to invite him to join the order. A nearby boy watches the exchange, completely bewildered. Silva reacts with panicked alarm, waving his hands frantically. He reminds her that she promised she would give up on asking him to join the order, shouting his refusal. Elda feigns ignorance, tapping her chin thoughtfully as if trying to recall such a promise. As Silva insists she did, she clears her throat loudly, changes the subject, and announces that she will ensure they all receive rewards worthy of their hard work before turning to leave. He stands there, utterly stunned. Just when he thought he had finally escaped Elda's relentless insistence that he join the Order of the Knights, she has cornered him once again. The captain, however, is oblivious to his dismay. With a cheerful grin, she thrusts a heavy pouch towards him, announcing it as his reward for slaying the vampire and rescuing the captives. Charles looks on, slightly overwhelmed by the scene. Taking the pouch, his thoughts immediately turn to the victims. He asks about the condition of the women they had saved. Elda reassures him that they are all safe. She explains that it seems they hadn't been held captive for long and suffered no severe injuries, so they recovered in no time. She adds her own grim theory. The vampire was likely keeping them as a reserve food supply. Her words do little to ease his mind. A troubled expression crosses his face as he considers the details. Something about the incident feels wrong. He silently reflects on the vampire's actions. The idea of keeping captives as mere emergency food seems too simple. He doubts a creature with that level of intelligence would operate so crudely. He resolves to seek more information, concluding that the church would have the most extensive knowledge on the subject. While Silva is lost in his own deductions, Kagaya notices the knight captain has also drifted off. Waving a hand in front of Elda's face, she asks what's wrong, trying to snap the dazed and blushing captain out of a reverie. At the gate, Silva seems distracted, stammering that nothing is wrong. The elite knight captain, Elda, dismisses him, telling him he can leave now. He offers a quick thanks for the hard work. He takes his leave, walking away with a heavy, thoughtful expression, clutching a pouch in his hands as Elda departs in the opposite direction. His troubled look does not go unnoticed. Kagaya suddenly appears at his side, leaning in close with a knowing smile to ask if something is bothering him. Startled, he admits that she has figured him out. Kagaya confidently replies that of course she would. After all, he is her husband. She then asks what exactly is on his mind. He explains that it's a nagging suspicion he can't shake, something he is still in the middle of processing. She finds his concentration endearing, remarking with a chuckle that his expression when deep in thought is lovely, like a detective's. Flustered, he tells her to stop teasing him. Kagaya announces that since their case is technically solved, she will head back to replenish her mana. She offers a final, playful encouragement, praying that her lovely detective will reach his answer. As they part ways, he feels the need to apologize for dragging her to all sorts of places for days on end. She waves it off, reminding him that she was the one who asked to tag along in the first place. He then remembers the reward, mentioning that he still needs to distribute her third of the share. Kagaya dismisses the huge sum of money as a mere pittance she doesn't need, leaning close to tell him that simply spending time with him is more than enough reward for her. She bids him a playful farewell, calling him her cute husband as she leaps away over a wall. She asks if he's getting embarrassed, and he blushes, admitting he'd prefer she didn't say such things so directly to his face. He watched as Kagaya departed. Her final words, a playful warning not to cheat on her, followed by a practical request to use the proper entrance next time. Her words echoed in his mind as he stood alone, gazing up at the sky where she had vanished. Cheating, he murmured to himself, a hint of confusion on his face. Shaking off the thought, he made his way down a set of stone steps, calling out an apology for the delay to the person waiting for him below. At the bottom of the stairs, Charles Orland greeted him with a warm smile, assuring him it was no trouble. He asked after Kagaya, and Charles explained that she had already gone home to attend to some business. He then expressed his gratitude to Charlie, stating that her help was instrumental in solving the case. She modestly waved off the praise, claiming she only helped for her own reasons. He insisted, however, that he was grateful and certain her contribution would be noted in her grades at the Heroes Academy. As he offered her the reward money, he thought to himself that seeing her happy face was a far better reward than any gold. To his surprise, she flatly refused her share of the money, holding up a hand to stop him. When he asked why, she explained her reasoning with quiet determination. She had merely found the demon, not defeated it. She had vowed to herself that she would never accept a reward until she became an official hero, capable of defeating demons with her own strength. Her conviction left him momentarily speechless. He was deeply moved by her noble goal, declaring it his favorite thing about her. Inspired by her dedication, he made a new offer, He would gladly buy her anything she wanted, but he had one condition. There was something he wanted in exchange. In response to his offer, Charles closes her eyes, a deep blush coloring her cheeks. She apologizes softly, explaining that what she wants is not something that can be obtained with money. She continues, trailing off with a simple, "You see," which only deepens Silva's confusion. He scratches the back of his head, his own face flushing as he struggles to understand her meaning. Looking up at him with a gentle yet determined expression, she finally reveals her true desire. What she wants, she states clearly, is time with him. Silva frets, a bead of sweat on his brow, as he finds himself completely unable to decide on an outfit. The thought of going on a date with Charlie, his favorite person, seems almost unbelievable to him. All he truly wants is to spend time with her. Having finally settled on a simple shirt, his preparations are interrupted by a knock. Maud stands at the door, inviting him out for a meal. He glances at the time and panics, hastily apologizing to Maud. With a wave, he sprints away, explaining that he has a date and must decline the offer. The older guard is left standing alone, the word date echoing in his mind as he stares after the departing young man with a stunned expression. Meanwhile, Silva reaches the bustling fountain square, his nerves fraying. He reflects on the fact that he has no experience with dates, not even in his previous life as a corporate drone, and anxiously wonders how he should even begin a conversation. He frantically tries to compose himself, internally insisting that this is not some formal, arranged meeting. His spiraling thoughts are cut short when a familiar voice calls out his name, apologizing for being late. His eyes widen in astonishment. Before him stands Charles Orland, not in her usual attire, but in a beautiful, light-colored dress with intricate details, her feet adorned with elegant sandals. She greets him with a simple morning, but her smile fades to a look of concern as she notices his reaction, asking if he is crying. Wiping a tear from his eye, he admits he was simply overcome with happiness, having never imagined he would see her in casual clothes. She responds with a gentle, comforting gesture. He clenches his fist, overwhelmed, thinking to himself that he has no regrets in his life. Above him, Charles Orland looks down with a concerned expression, remarking that he is acting weird. His strange behavior startles her, and she exclaims that it looks as if his very soul is leaving his body. Snapping back to reality, he realizes it was a close call. He had almost passed on from the shock. Recovering his composure, he scratches the back of his head and apologizes for startling her, wishing her a good morning. Charles smiles warmly and returns the greeting. With the awkward moment past, he asks what she would like to do for the day. Charles suggests they go shopping together, mentioning that a new cafe has recently opened. She then adds that she's happy to go wherever he wants. Having decided on their plans, the two walk side by side through the city's bustling main thoroughfare. Their shopping trip begins in earnest. Charles joyfully explores a clothing store, while Silva gives her an encouraging thumbs up. As the day wears on, Silva becomes laden with numerous shopping bags while Charles happily makes another purchase. He stands triumphantly, arms outstretched with his haul, as Charles clutches a newly acquired item to her chest with a blissful expression. After a successful shopping spree, they finally arrive at the new cafe, its charming sign hanging just outside the entrance. Seated inside, Silva holds a cup of coffee and looks earnestly at his companion. He addresses her as Charlie and asks directly why, of all people, she invited him on a date. He waited for her answer, and she began to explain, leaning forward slightly. She had wanted to speak with him alone, as it had been some time since they'd had the chance, and something had been weighing on her mind. He prompted her to continue, asking what was bothering her. She explained that the issue stemmed from their party leader, Alan, within the context of forming parties and taking lessons at the Heroes Academy. Her expression soured with discomfort. She confessed that Alan had been flirting with the female members of their party every single day, and it was making her deeply uncomfortable. The information hit Silva with force. He processed it internally, wondering if Alan was the one causing her distress and if he was actually dating the other women. Charles confirmed his unspoken question, adding that Alan had also been making passes at her, which was a serious problem. A sudden, shocking realization dawned on him. He connected Alan's behavior to a specific, difficult scenario from his past knowledge, the harem route of this world. He remembered it was an incredibly hard path to follow. He recalled the route's strict rules. One had to raise the affection of all the heroines equally and clear all their confession events at the same time. Dating just one person midway through meant immediate failure, resulting in being dumped by everyone. From her words, he knew Alan had already lost significant affection points with Charlie. Back in the present, Charles continued her explanation. She clarified that while she had faith in Alan as a comrade, the idea of him pursuing other girls while supposedly having a lover made her feel sick. She went on, revealing that Alan often asked her out on dates. Though she always refused, he remained pushy about it. Silva listened, murmuring that it sounded like a rough situation. As Charles began to add something else, she blushed and covered her mouth. At the same time, a pang of guilt struck Silva. He covered his face, silently apologizing to her for having pursued that very same route so many times before he was reincarnated. She fell silent. Her sudden pause ignited his curiosity, and he found himself desperate to know what she had been about to say. But she simply dismissed it as nothing, leaving him wondering. He watches as Charles takes a delicate sip from her cup, her eyes closed. She muses aloud that a maiden's heart is a complicated thing, admitting that she has secrets she cannot even tell him. The implication of her words sends him tumbling backward out of his chair in shock. He stares up at the ceiling, his mind reeling with an impossible thought. His clatter draws Charles's attention. She leans over with a worried expression, asking what's wrong. As he looks up from the floor, about to respond, a new voice cuts through the air. The voice belongs to Alan, who strides into view with a confident smirk. He is flanked by two young women, Margaret Neris and Rena Cassius, both identified as heroine candidates. "Fancy meeting you here," he exclaims. His sudden appearance startles Charles, who questions what he and his companions are doing there. Rena, one of the girls, cheerfully announces that the three of them are on a date. She then leans in close to Charles, reminding her with a bright smile that they had invited her to come along as well just the other day. Watching the interaction from his seat, Silva takes a slow sip from his cup. He quietly concludes that these must be the two girls Alan is currently pursuing. He recalls from his past life's knowledge that Rena and Margaret are considered easy heroines to conquer. In the game's story, they not only fall for Alan, but actively encourage his harem building, even helping him to win over other women. He considers the social dynamics at the academy, realizing how difficult it is to change party members. It would be an incredibly awkward environment for Charles, forced to be around the leader's other romantic pursuits. Alan's gaze then shifts past Charles, landing on the unfamiliar man sitting at her table. With a questioning look, he asks her who that is. Charles, with a weary expression, introduces the man beside her as Silva, a mere gatekeeper. She then adds, with a hint of defiance, that they are also on a date. He stares in disbelief, suddenly sensing an overwhelming surge of mana emanating from the gatekeeper. He wonders what this could possibly mean. His confusion erupts into outrage. He confronts Charles, demanding to know why she would refuse his offer only to be on a date with someone so unremarkable. Charles retorts sharply, telling him he is being rude to Silva. She decides to leave, urging Silva to go somewhere else with her. A shadow falls over Alan's face as he watches them, pleading with Charles not to follow the gatekeeper. He processes the scene, a grim realization dawning on him. Charles is dating this man. His thoughts immediately twist to a darker conclusion, and he declares that the gatekeeper must be a demon. Both Silva and Charles react with shock. He presses his accusation, connecting Silva to recent rumors of a demon kidnapping women. He claims Silva is the culprit, planning to deceive Charles and abduct her. His companions quickly agree with the theory. Rena exclaims that it makes perfect sense, as there's no other reason Charles would refuse Alan's offer. Margaret adds her own conclusion. The demon must have brainwashed her. She cries out in frustration, insisting she hasn't been brainwashed. She desperately asks why they refuse to understand how she truly feels. Hearing her distress, Silva looks on with concern, quietly saying her name. He misinterprets her plea as further evidence of a powerful mind control spell. Pointing an accusatory finger, he roars at Silva, calling him a wretched demon and swearing he won't allow him to toy with someone so precious to him. Silva can only grit his teeth in frustration. The heroines move to intervene, with Alan and Margaret grabbing Charles's arms to pull her away. They insist she shouldn't stay there, but she struggles against them, crying out in protest. Alan, looking distraught, laments how severe the supposed brainwashing is, completely misreading the situation. His accusations echoed in Silva's mind. The image of the protagonist he once admired was replaced by a pathetic reality. As this disillusionment washed over him, his grip tightened on the teacup in his hand until it shattered violently, the pieces scattering across the table. The sharp crack of porcelain drew the attention of Alan and his companions. Margaret looked over in surprise, questioning Silva's name aloud. Alan turned to face him, only to see Silva rising to his feet, a menacing aura emanating from him. In response, Alan drew his weapon, demanding to know what Silva was trying to pull. Silva, however, calmly raised a hand to stop Charles from intervening. He looked directly at Alan, his expression cold as he stated he never realized what a thick-skulled bonehead Alan truly was. Charles looked at him, concerned, as Alan explained that he had intended to stay quiet, but Alan's own words had provoked him. With a sudden shift in demeanor, Silva turned to Charles with a gentle smile, ruffling her hair and apologizing for letting Alan get under his skin. He then faced Alan and his friends once more, his expression firm. He declared that, given their current behavior, he could not hand Charlie over to them. Alan's face twisted in rage at the refusal, shouting that he didn't need Silva's permission. Beside him, Rena coolly observed that Alan was the one running his mouth. The taunt spurred Alan to action. Declaring he would simply take her back by force, he lunged forward. Silva's eyes narrowed, accepting the challenge. Fine by me, he thought. As his opponent charged, a memory of a happier time between Charles and Alan surfaced in his mind. He understood that the Alan she once knew would have understood her feelings. He had no intention of denying the reality of the aggressive person standing before him. However, there was one thing about this current Alan that he could not forgive. Her own resolve hardened. She would be damned if she let a scenario like this play out. Alan's eyes burned with a fierce, unwavering intensity. He declared that a reality where Charlie couldn't smile was unacceptable. His outburst caused Charles to look on with concern, murmuring Silva's name. Stepping forward in simple, casual clothes, Silva calmly announced that he would personally handle Alan and straighten him out. The offer only enraged Alan further. He snarled, calling Silva a cocky demon and vowing to tear him apart with his blade. Unfazed by the threat, Silva's own expression hardened into a menacing grin. He clenched his fist, a dark energy swirling around him as he warned Alan not to underestimate a man who has been a troublesome nerd since his past life. The two now stood face to face, the air thick with unspoken aggression. Inside the premises of the Heroes Academy, on the expansive training grounds, several figures are gathered. There, Alan confronts Silva, expressing surprise that he would choose this particular place for their confrontation. He points his sword forward, explaining that here he can unleash his full power without worrying about the surroundings. Alan simply smirks, warning Silva that he is going to regret this. As the two prepare to face off, Charles Orland turns to Silva, her expression filled with guilt. She apologizes, believing she is the reason he has been dragged into this mess. He tells her she has nothing to apologize for. His gaze shifts, hardening as he declares that the one who truly needs to apologize is Alan. On the sidelines, Margaret Nara scoffs, boasting that with Alan's skill and power, he can wipe out a lowly demon like Silva in an instant. Rena Cassius impatiently urges Alan to beat him quickly so they can continue their day. Her companion's body begins to glow with a powerful aura. Alan declares the battle is obviously over and that once he wins, Charles will fall in love with his strength again. Charles looks away, clearly uncomfortable. Silva's expression hardens into one of cold fury. He vows to defeat this person and make him apologize to Charlie. She looks toward him, acknowledging that Alan is indeed strong. However, she tells Silva that she wants him to win and will be rooting for him. He smiles, accepting her support and telling her to leave it to him. With her encouragement bolstering him, Silva faces his opponent. Alan taunts him, asking if he's ready and if he truly intends to fight with such shabby gear. Unfazed, Silva raises his sword and declares, "Bring it on." He held his simple sword forward, his gaze steady and unwavering. This gear, he asserted, was more than enough to face Alan. His opponent could only sneer at the declaration. In response, Alan roared for him to keep dreaming and dashed forward, his blade erupting in a brilliant, energized slash. But the gatekeeper was faster, sidestepping the blow with ease. Alan's eyes widened in disbelief. He had dodged it. His opponent's shock gave him an opening. Before Alan could recover, Silva was already inside his guard, his own fist drawn back and ready to strike. The blow landed with a heavy thud against Alan's forearm. Though blocked, the force was staggering, making him grit his teeth as he acknowledged the sheer power behind the punch. The recoil from his own strike sent him sliding backward across the dirt. Alan stared, bewildered, questioning if that incredible strength was the result of magic enhancement. He glared, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. Pointing an accusatory finger, he declared that Silva was no ordinary gatekeeper. With a dismissive sigh, Silva tossed his sword to the ground. It landed with a metallic clang. He reminded Alan that he'd already told him he was nothing special, just a gatekeeper. The gesture left Alan completely baffled, wondering what he was trying to pull. He then cracked his knuckles, a confident grin spreading across his face. Against an opponent like Alan, he proclaimed his bare hands were plenty. Enraged by the insult, Alan roared at him not to underestimate him. Fueled by fury, he charged once more, swinging his blade in a wide arc. Silva ducked beneath the attack, closing the distance in an instant. He warned Alan to clench his teeth just as his fist connected squarely with his jaw, the impact echoing with a dull thud. The punch sent Alan flying, his body thrown violently backward through the air. A cry of shock and pain escaped his lips as he was completely overwhelmed by the strike. The onlookers could scarcely believe what they had witnessed. Charles Orland and Rena Cassius stared in wide-eyed shock, with Rena crying out in disbelief. Their shock was justified. Alan had been sent flying by the single blow, crashing into a distant wall with a heavy thud. Rena voiced their shared astonishment, noting that Alan was wiped out in one strike. Nearby, a dark-haired man in a cloak knelt, gripping his sword and cursing the turn of events. As he lay in the crater, Margaret Naris rushed to his side. She urged him to get himself together and began casting a healing spell, calling for solace to mend his wounds. Meanwhile, the one who delivered the blow, Silva, wore a contented smile. The confrontation had made him feel better, though a fleeting thought crossed his mind. Perhaps he had hit him too hard. His opponent's companions were focused elsewhere. The dark-haired man wore an expression of anguish and fury as Rena and Charles tried to support him, their own faces etched with concern. He shook off their support, his gaze locked on Charles. When Charles questioned if he was there for Alan, he stated his true purpose with grim determination. He needed to take Charles back. From across the courtyard, Silva began to retort, stating matter-of-factly, "Well, Charlie isn't your teacher." His words were cut short by a furious roar. "Shut up," the dark-haired man bellowed, his face contorted with rage. "We're bonded by a strong love." His furious declaration echoed as a shadowy, demonic visage cackled behind him. Pointing his sword forward, he made a solemn vow. "Demon Lord, I swear to my comrade that I'll defeat you." He then lowered his voice, his eyes narrowing with a chilling intensity as he stared directly at Silva, adding a quiet, menacing thought. "I wonder about that." He speaks with conviction, feeling the heartbeats of his comrades. He declares that they are bonded by a strong love, a bond that will never be broken. From another place, Silva watches these events unfold. He finds the story a bit generic, but admits to loving such classic tales. He can feel the passion in the dialogue, remarking on how cool Alan is and urging him onward. Suddenly, Silva's voice cuts through the scene. He points an accusatory finger at the dark-haired man, shouting at the womanizer to stop spouting such goddamn lines. The man and Charles are both startled by the outburst. The dark-haired man glares, infuriated. He yells back that Silva is just spouting hogwash and declares that he will become a hero. His passionate declaration continues as he stands firm, insisting that Charles has to be by his side. Observing this, Silva's expression hardens. He thinks to himself that this guy doesn't get it all. The dark-haired man ignores the interruption, turning his full attention back to Charles. He pleads for her to wait, promising he will get her back right away. Charles remains silent, her head bowed. She finally looks up, but not at him. Her gaze is distant as she calls out to Alan, asking him to listen. Her voice catches Alan's attention. He turns to her, a look of hopeful confusion on his face, as she tells him she has made up her mind. Before she can continue, another woman steps forward, placing a hand on Alan's arm. She looks at him directly and announces that, as of today, she is quitting his party. Alan's face contorts in shock. He and Charles are left utterly stunned by the sudden departure, their mouths agape in disbelief. From his vantage point, Silva observes the chaotic scene, a slight flush on his cheeks. The unfolding drama continues as Charles turns her attention to Silva. She explains that thanks to him, her feelings are now clear. She believes she can become a hero through hard work, even if it means leaving her current party. Her declaration is cut short by the furious arrival of the dark-haired man, who demands to know what she is saying. Unfazed, Charles commands him to listen. He stares in disbelief, his voice cracking as he insists they were supposed to share a deep bond. Charles, however, remains composed, coolly informing him that no one is manipulating her. His shock renders him speechless. With a weary expression, she tells him to give it a rest already. Refusing to accept her words, he grits his teeth and makes a bold declaration. He will become her lover and the strongest hero. His gaze shifts to Silva, a silent thought blaming him for this turn of events. With a roar, he unleashes a skill, shouting for his soul bond to activate as a powerful energy begins to glow around him. The activated spell immediately arcs towards Alan and Charles, engulfing them in crackling energy. They cry out in surprise as the power surges through them. From his perspective, Silva recognizes the nature of the spell. The dark-haired man glares forward, feeling his own mana being siphoned away by the bond he has just forged. He understands the mechanics of the spell perfectly. It is a technique that converts the bonds with one's comrades into a special form of mana. The spell's power is dictated by two factors: the number of close allies and the depth of the connection between them. The more lovers one has, the stronger it becomes. Silva realizes that the man must have deliberately sought out more comrades and deepened his bonds with them for the sole purpose of learning this very spell. This realization fills Silva with disgust. The man is truly irredeemable. His suspicions are confirmed as the dark-haired man smirks, revealing that his entire fixation on Charles was merely a means to strengthen his spell. Suddenly, a powerful blast erupts, sending the dark-haired man flying backward. The sight is familiar to Silva, reminding him of his own past experiences, like someone who had once chosen the wrong path. Despite the man's defeat, Charles looks on with concern, warning Silva to be careful, acknowledging the incredible amount of mana her former comrade possesses. Silva reflects that unlike a game, real life offers no second chances. Despite the stakes, he turns with a confident smile, declaring that he will resolve the situation swiftly. His declaration enrages the dark-haired man, who screams his ambition to become the strongest hero and save everyone. Charles looks on with contempt, questioning how he can speak of saving people after causing such pain, dismissing his claim to heroism. Silva simply acknowledges the man's stated desire. The man directs his fury at Silva, yelling about his need for everyone's power to achieve his goal. Unfazed, Silva raises his sword, calmly agreeing with him. A sudden burst of energy erupts, sending the dark-haired man flying backward with a pained cry. As his opponent reels, Silva's expression hardens. He states that as a resident of this world and a fan of Alan, he cannot forgive anyone who would make his favorite sad. Vowing to make the man pay, he prepares to unleash a secret technique of the Zalencia sword style. He roars the name of the attack: Blue Sky. The swordsman surges forward, his body a blur as he executes the technique, leaving a trail of shimmering particles in his wake. His blade whistles through the air with blinding speed. A brilliant blaze of energy erupts from the strike, forcing Charles to shield her eyes as the shockwave sends both Alan and the dark-haired man tumbling across the ground. Standing over his fallen opponent, Silva advises him to try and understand the feelings of others. From the ground, the dark-haired man stares up in horror, realizing with dawning terror that his soul bond has been affected. The realization crushes him. With his sword shattered beside him, the man collapses to his knees, utterly defeated. He remained on the ground, his gaze distant and unfocused. In the background, Silva let out a weary sigh. The battle concluded. But the defeated man's attention was elsewhere. His voice, though weak, carried a tone of profound letdown as he spoke to someone unseen. "You've greatly disappointed me," he murmured, Hero Alan. A sharp voice cuts through the tension in the training yard. Charles Orland strides forward, demanding to know what everyone is doing. She directs her question to Alan, asking what fuss he is causing on a day off, while Silva looks on in a panic, recognizing her as someone named Miss Reeve. The name Reeve throws him for a loop. He frantically tries to recall if a character with that name ever appeared in the game he knows, wondering if she might be a scrap character. As he puzzles over this, Charles Orland glares down at Alan, her expression furious. In response to her unspoken question, Alan stammers an explanation, pointing a finger towards Silva. He tells her they suspect the man is a demon. Her anger gives way to thoughtful concern. She brings a gloved hand to her chin, murmuring the accusation to herself. "That guy's a demon, you say?" Before she can deliberate further, Silva shouts, his voice filled with conviction. He guarantees that he is no demon. His denial is interrupted by the arrival of the elite knight captain. She addresses Silva directly, noting that he seems to have found himself in some tricky trouble. She explains that she was drawn to the area by a surge of incredible mana and was surprised to find him there. Looking exasperated, Silva retorts that the feeling is mutual. He asks the commander what she is doing at the academy. She explains cheerfully that she has come for a meeting about the upcoming combat practicals being held at the academy. The Order of Knights will be in attendance, she adds, just in case anything unforeseen should happen. Silva listens, a look of understanding dawning on his face. As the group walks away, his mind flashes back to the main story of the game. He recalls this specific event. During the practicals, the hero candidates of the academy are attacked by level 3 low-level demons. He remembers that this is Alan's first real battle. A vision of Alan and the dark-haired man fighting together fills his mind, but his thought trails off, an unspoken concern lingering. But still, the elite knight captain turned her bright smile upon him, addressing him by name, Silva. She playfully chided him, questioning if it was admirable for him to treat a hero candidate in such a way. Her words were accompanied by action as she playfully grabbed Alan, remarking that bullying the weak wasn't like him at all. Silva, caught off guard, stammered in confusion, while the captain seemed to wonder if she had perhaps misstepped. His embarrassment quickly turned to fury. Alan wrenched himself free, his face a mask of frustration as he vowed that one day he would defeat Silva with his own hands, a sentiment Silva recognized as hardly fitting for a protagonist. With that declaration, he turned and fled. The others called for him to wait, but Alan didn't look back, running off into the distance. As Alan disappeared from view, the captain turned back to Silva, a knowing look in her eyes. She observed that Alan seemed to hate him a great deal, while Silva could only sweat, acknowledging that a lot had indeed happened between them. Her attention then shifted. Spotting the other young woman nearby, she called out, asking if she was perhaps Charles. Charles, surprised, questioned how the captain knew her name. The captain explained that she had heard a lot about her from Silva, specifically mentioning her help with the vampire case. Charles confirmed that Silva is always a great help to her, prompting the captain to ask if she was also a student at the Heroes Academy. She continued with her praise for the gate guard, declaring that as far as she was concerned, Silva was the strongest soldier she knew. Just being with him, she added, would make one's skills grow significantly. Blushing, Charles quietly agreed, admitting she thought so too. This earnest praise created a moment of shared awkwardness. Charles cleared her throat, flustered, while Silva scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. The captain, however, found the entire exchange delightful, letting out a hearty laugh. Seeking to end the moment, Charles regained her composure and stepped forward. She apologized for interrupting their conversation, but stated that it was time for their meeting with Miss Elda, formally addressing the captain by her name. The elite knight captain, Elda, offers a quick apology before bidding farewell to both Silva and Charles. Silva, scratching the back of his head, sheepishly apologizes for any trouble he might have caused. As she walks away, she suddenly stops and turns back, a wide, mischievous grin on her face. She dismisses his apology, declaring that it wasn't trouble at all. Her expression shifts to one of gleeful accusation as she points directly at Silva. She declares that it is trouble, and as a penalty for causing a scene, he must participate in the combat practicals at the Heroes Academy. She adds with a booming laugh that he has no right to refuse, leaving him utterly stunned. He is left speechless, the command echoing in his mind. His entire being seems to shrink in confusion, unable to process what he has just been ordered to do. As he tries to make sense of the situation, Charles turns to him with a look of remorse. She apologizes for involving him in so much trouble, admitting that her trespassing was the root cause. He immediately reassures her, insisting there's nothing to be sorry about. He explains that everything he did was by his own choice. His expression softens as he looks at her. He tells her that because of this, she can now leave the hero's party without any regrets, adding that he is genuinely happy for her. He reflects internally on the situation. With this, he believes Charles has completely stepped down from her role as the heroine of the main story. He muses that she likely wouldn't have had a significant part to play in the main plot from this point on, wondering if her dream of becoming a hero will ever come true. A sudden thought strikes him. If Charles is no longer part of the main story, does that mean that even if he becomes deeply involved, she won't appear? He finds it impossible to imagine a future where she is completely absent. He glances over at the unsuspecting Charles, a blush creeping onto his face. A hopeful, flustered thought crosses his mind. Perhaps his involvement wouldn't negatively affect her after all. He walks alongside Charles, his mind racing. He internally scolds himself, thinking he should be happy just to have his favorite person by his side, yet he thanks her aloud. The conflicting thoughts create a visible tension on his face. She responds, her voice filled with a newfound resolve. She tells him that, thanks to him, she has steeled herself to become a hero, even if she has to do it alone. Her expression softens as she looks at him, a faint blush on her cheeks. She begins to ask that when that day comes, when she is a full-fledged hero, will he? Their moment is abruptly shattered by the sound of a child sobbing. They turn to find a small boy crying by himself. Silva approaches him, asking if he's all right and where his parents are. The boy, wiping his eyes, replies that they aren't here. He then asks where the boy's house is. The child explains that he no longer has a mother or a father, and that his home is the church. The answer catches Silva by surprise. With tears welling in his eyes, the boy elaborates. He had been at the priest's place, playing outside with everyone. He concludes his story, explaining that the others all went off somewhere, leaving him behind. Silva realizes the boy was simply separated from his group. Upon hearing this, Charles looks at Silva with concern and suggests they take the child to the church. He readily agrees. He kneels down to the boy's level, a kind smile on his face, and asks for his name. The boy replies, Addy. Silva then offers to carry him home on his back, an offer that makes Addy's eyes widen in surprise and delight. With Addy now securely on his back, Silva walks through the town streets. The boy looks around with newfound cheer as Charles walks beside them, a warm, happy smile on her face as she watches the two. He carries the small boy on his back as he and Charles walk along the stone path. Addy, perched high, beams with delight. As they continue, Addy points ahead, exclaiming that they've arrived at the church. The sight of the building sparks a thought in Silva's mind. It might be a place to gather information on vampires. At the church entrance, a priest rushes out, his face a mixture of panic and relief as he calls out Addy's name. He expresses his gladness that the boy is safe and asks if the two strangers brought him back. He then kneels, a gentle smile on his face, and introduces himself as Dan, the child's guardian. Charles confirms the situation with Addy, who beams and gives his heartfelt thanks to both Mr. Silva and Miss Charles for ensuring his safe return. Standing again, Dan expresses his profound gratitude, admitting with a worried expression that he nearly had a heart attack when the other children told him Addy had been separated from them. The boy indignantly refutes this, shouting that it was the others who got separated from him. Dan gently scolds him, explaining that he still made everyone worry and must apologize. Addy reluctantly concedes. Watching the exchange, Silva observes that Dan seems to be a good-hearted priest who knows how to properly discipline a child. This leads him to believe the man might be willing to answer his questions. His attention returns to his guests, and Dan insists on expressing his thanks in a more formal manner. Silva begins to decline the offer, but then stops, realizing he has an opportunity. He tells Dan there is, in fact, something he wants to ask. Surprised, but agreeable, Dan says he will answer if he can. Silva then turns to Charles, asking if she can spare some time for this. Seeing their accord, Dan invites them to speak inside the church, leading the way. He sits down at a table, a bit flustered by the sudden and serious line of questioning. Leaning forward, he asks Silva what he wants to know exactly. Silva explains that he was hoping the priest could teach him anything he knows about vampires. The word hangs in the air, and Dan reacts with visible shock, repeating, "The vampires?" His initial surprise gives way to a more focused inquiry. He apologizes and asks for clarification. Is Silva interested in the vampires that exist in myths, or the recent vampire incident? Silva confirms he wants to learn about both. Silva elaborates, stating that while he believes the vampire issue has been resolved, something about the case continues to bother him. The priest studies him for a moment, then asks if he happens to be a knight. Silva confirms that he is, for what it's worth. His confirmation seems to weigh on the priest, who looks down with his hands clasped tightly and murmurs that he understands. Silva watches him, his own expression unreadable. After a moment of contemplation, Dan looks up. He offers to share what he has learned about them from legends in his time as a cleric, asking if Silva would mind hearing the details. He begins his tale, recounting the ancient lore. The moniker vampire, he explains, is a title for demons from legends, said to have evolved from vampire bats. Their power is so immense that fables tell of them leveling entire cities to the ground. He elaborates on the source of their terrifying strength: human blood. The more blood they consume, the stronger they become. A single vampire who is fed on 10 people becomes so powerful that it requires several first-rate heroes to defeat, and even then, it is no easy feat. He adds one final, unsettling detail. According to the fables, vampires also possess the power to create minions. Silva, listening intently, repeats the word, questioning its meaning. He listens as the priest, Dan, clasps his hands and continues his explanation. Minions, he clarifies, are humans who have been given vampire blood. According to the lore, this bestows upon them powers similar to a true vampire and an instinct to attack other humans. Taking in this grim information, he thanks Dan for the details. Beside him, Charles Orland notices his somber expression and calls his name, her voice tinged with concern. Dan assures them they can return with more questions anytime. His gaze then falls to his own hand, which he mentions he burned recently, before asking if Silva's hand was also injured. The question hangs in the air. He quietly processes the priest's words. With a final look of concern, Dan urges him to take care of himself. Silva confirms that he will. Once outside, he turns to Charles and apologizes for dragging her along for so long. She dismisses his apology with a gentle smile, reminding him that she was the one who invited him out. She then asks if their discussion was about the vampire case. He confirms it, admitting that he's been bothered by a strange feeling ever since he defeated a particular demon. His mind flashes back to the hooded figure he fought. He voices his new theory aloud, that the creature he defeated might not have been a demon at all, but a human turned into a minion. If true, it means the master vampire is still lurking somewhere in the city. Lost in this disturbing realization, he is pulled back to reality by Charles calling his name. He apologizes for being distracted and, noticing how late it has become, offers to walk her home. When she asks if he is sure, he puffs his chest out confidently and declares that escort duty is also part of a soldier's job. Her expression softens at his earnestness, a slight blush appearing on her cheeks. As she gazes at him, she thinks to herself that she didn't get the chance to tell him what she wanted today, but seems content to let the moment pass for now. She stands before a large, stately building, her expression soft and contemplative. A private thought crosses her mind as she gazes into the distance, wondering if she will ever find the right moment to tell him what's on her mind. Elsewhere, Dan the priest holds up a piece of tattered, dark fabric. A single, round hole is torn through it. His expression is grim, a bead of sweat tracing his temple as he examines the clue, his brow furrowed in concentration. At his post before a massive, fortified gate, the guard Silva calls for the next person in line. Holding a quill and clipboard, he glances back at the seemingly endless queue of people waiting for entry, wondering just how far it stretches. He reflects on the situation. It's his first time working at the southern gate, and he hadn't anticipated it being so busy. He realizes that with staffing shortages everywhere due to frequent demon incidents, he must fulfill his gatekeeping duties to the best of his ability. A sense of unease settles over him. The exponential increase in demon cases, coupled with the recent vampire incident, feels familiar. It's playing out exactly like the main story of the game he knows, but he has a nagging feeling that there's been a mishap in their plans. His eyes widen with a dreadful thought. He wonders if his own involvement is the cause, if he has somehow become entangled in the main storyline. His internal monologue is abruptly shattered by a sharp voice calling out, "Hey!" Startled, he looks up from his work. The voice belongs to another guard with spiky, light-colored hair, who chides him for spacing out and tells him to get back to his job. Flustered, Silva quickly agrees, addressing the other man as Mr. Crow. He recognizes Crow as a senior soldier in charge of guarding the southern gate. He internally concedes that his superior has good looks, but his personality leaves much to be desired. As Silva processes a traveler's papers, he watches Crow lean in towards a young woman, complimenting her and asking for her name. The woman, blushing, introduces herself as Yulia. Crow takes her hand, expressing his admiration for her name and asking what brings her to the royal capital. Yulia explains that she has found a job as a staff member in a flower shop in a shopping district. He hands her permit back with a final flirtatious remark, calling her as pretty as a flower. From the side, Silva watches with an irritated expression, annoyed that his colleague is hitting on girls while on duty. He irritably tells his colleague to work faster. Crow, however, dismisses the newcomer, telling him to buzz off and that he doesn't take orders from him. The merchant between them simply asks for his permit. He internally fumes at Crow's nerve, dismissing him as a piece of garbage and a mere background character, just like himself. As he laments how much he misses working with Madai, a clear voice calls out from the crowd, looking for a gatekeeper. The voice is instantly familiar to him, filling him with a sense of unease. The woman, Commander Elda, approaches the gate, announcing that she is searching for somebody. Crow immediately interjects, fawning over the commander's beauty and eagerly offering his assistance. Unimpressed, she clarifies that she is looking for a gatekeeper named Silva. Realizing he is the target, Silva attempts to slip away unnoticed. His escape is short-lived. Commander Elda spots him instantly, grabbing him by the uniform. She declares that she has a favor to ask and will be borrowing him, ordering him to accompany her to the Knight's headquarters immediately. A bewildered Crow is left standing at the gate. Moments later, inside the commander's office at the Knight's headquarters, Elda gets straight to the point. She explains that while the recent vampire incident has been resolved, a new case has surfaced, a kidnapping. All of the victims, she specifies, are female, and their only lead is reports of a suspicious person wearing a black cloak. The mention of a black cloak triggers a dark memory. For Silva, a fleeting vision of a menacing, cloaked figure. He voices his suspicion to the commander, stating his belief that this kidnapping is connected to the vampire case. When she questions him, pointing out that he already defeated the vampire, Silva explains that the creature he fought felt surprisingly weak. He elaborates on his theory, recalling that vampires are known to have the power to create thralls. He concludes there is a strong possibility that the creature he killed was not the master vampire, but one of its subservient minions. The commander grimly accepts the implication. The true vampire is still at large. Silva's expression hardens with regret as he clenches his fist, tormented by the thought that if he had realized the truth sooner, he could have prevented this new incident from happening. He sharply accepts Commander Elda's request for help, a decision that surprises her. She notes that with vampires involved, the situation has worsened, and she finds his sudden cooperation unusual, as he would normally be more opposed. He explains with a determined smile that it's nothing strange. He simply cannot allow someone else to clean up a mess he feels responsible for. Pleased to see him so motivated, Elda stands and offers him a scroll, telling him to take it as it might prove to be a clue for his search. He looks at the offered item, puzzled. He unrolls the scroll, revealing a long list. Elda explains that it details the casualties from the vampire case. She elaborates that besides the girls he rescued, there were other captives who are now hospitalized. She suggests he visit the clinic, as they might be able to provide some information. Silva immediately asks for the clinic's location. Elda informs him that it's the Rachel Clinic, located on the outskirts of town. The name gives Silva a visible jolt of surprise. She continues, describing the clinic's doctor, Rachel Forsert, as one of the conquerable characters of Briaz, and a bit of a troublesome person. However, Elda adds that deepening one's bond with her has its perks, such as being able to purchase healing items cheaply. With a determined expression, he confirms that he understands and will head there immediately. Elda smiles, telling him she's counting on him. He arrives at the clinic, the memory of his last visit to such a place, when he saved the captive girls, surfacing in his mind. As he steps inside, the foul stench hits him, and he instinctively covers his nose and mouth. He calls out for Miss Rachel, asking if she is present. His eyes scan the room, noticing shelves lined with healing materials and medicine. A woman with reddish-brown hair and glasses emerges, adjusting her spectacles. She asks what he needs, questioning if someone is wounded or sick before noting that he doesn't appear to be either. Silva looks up at her, a flicker of recognition in his eyes as he tries to recall where he knows her from. He expresses surprise that she remembers him, as they have only met once before. Rachel Forsert confirms his identity, recalling him as the gatekeeper who brought in the girls who had been attacked by demons. She continues, a sly grin spreading across her face, explaining that of course she would remember him. He was with the top-grade hero, or, as she puts it, the monster. He objects to her calling Kagaya a monster, but Rachel ignores his complaint. She leans in close, exhaling a puff of smoke as she asks for his name. He introduces himself as Silva. Rachel's eyes scan his form, and she remarks that he has an amusing body before bluntly ordering him to get undressed, leaving him utterly stunned. Confused by the demand, he asks for the reason. Rachel states plainly that if he wants her to hear him out, he must first undress. As he reluctantly removes his shirt, a small, fairy-like creature at Rachel's side explains that this is one of the doctor's bad habits. Apparently, she can discern what sort of person someone is simply by inspecting their body. She leans in for a closer look, observing his physique, and noting that he's the sort of person who can make himself look skinny while clothed. After a moment of silence, she tells him he can put his clothes back on, stating she now has a good idea of who he is. As he pulls his shirt on, he questions how such a brief inspection could possibly tell her anything about him. She ignores his skepticism, instead stating her deduction. He is not a knight, but a soldier. When he confirms this is correct, she simply remarks that his body is very amusing. Her amusement takes a dark turn as she muses aloud that she can investigate it more thoroughly at a later time, by dissecting it. The suggestion horrifies Silva, though the small creature quickly insists the doctor is only kidding. He stands awkwardly before Rachel Forsert, now fully dressed. She cuts straight to the point, asking what he needs from her. He explains that he wants to investigate the survivors of the vampire case. She seems skeptical, reminding him that the case was supposedly resolved and that she had already given all the information to the knights. Unfazed, he explains his reasoning. There's a chance some vampires are still alive, and he needs to question the survivors directly. Her demeanor shifts instantly. She stands, telling him to wait a moment. A look of understanding crosses her face as she agrees to his request. She leads him to a room with a barred door, where a young girl recoils in fear at the sight of him. He understands her terror, assuming she's had a terrifying experience. Rachel steps in to reassure the child, identifying her as the one he needs to speak with. She tells the girl not to worry, explaining that Silva is not a bad person, but a soldier of justice who protects people. He kneels to meet the girl's gaze, making a solemn promise to protect her and everyone else. He vows to catch the villains who put her through such an ordeal. His earnestness reaches her, and with newfound resolve, she agrees to cooperate. As she clenches her fists in determination, his attention is drawn to one of her hands. He points, asking what happened to it. A closer look reveals a peculiar, web-like bruise spreading across the back of her hand. He notes its unusual shape, questioning if it's just a bruise. He gently asks if she remembers when she got it. The girl looks away, distressed, unable to recall the moment. She can only say that the mark was already there when the attacker found her. Her words give him pause. He falls silent, contemplating the implications of the pre-existing mark. After a moment of thought, he offers the girl a reassuring thumbs up, thanking her for the helpful information. The three continue their discussion, the initial tension now eased. He presents his theory to Rachel Forsert, who listens from an adjacent room. He believes the strange symbol on the survivor's hand is a marking etched by the vampire. She steps into the room, acknowledging that his reasoning is logical, but pointing out that it's merely a hypothesis without definitive proof. She muses that if he's correct, the mark could serve as a clue for those who have yet to be attacked. He brightens, feeling confident that he now has a solid lead that will help him solve the case. He earnestly thanks Miss Rachel for her kind cooperation. She smiles faintly, her eyes half-lidded, and replies that she's glad she was of help. Her demeanor shifts entirely, a greedy glint in her eyes. She declares that for her help, he must pay her 60,000 gold. As Silva recoils in shock, she claims to be joking, but then makes a strange counteroffer. In exchange for her help, She wants permission to dissect his body when he dies, as she cannot let such a valuable sample go to waste. A stunned Silva can only say he'll think about it. The scene shifts to a quiet courtyard where a young woman with dark pigtails tends to a bed of white flowers. She greets Dan, the priest, as he approaches, remarking on how lovely the flowers are. As she reaches for a bloom, her hand slips, and she pricks her finger on a thorny stem, crying out in pain. The priest's attention is drawn to her hand. He asks about it, and she cheerfully explains that she got the bruise the day before, blaming her own clumsiness for not noticing how it happened. His expression turns deadly serious. He leans in, informing her that what she has is not a mere bruise, but the devil's curse, and warns that it will bring her misfortune if left untreated. The young woman is struck with terror at the word curse. The priest calmly tells her they must go to the church to have it removed before it's too late. Panicked, she immediately agrees, pleading for him to save her as she follows him away from the flowers. Silva stands before the captain as she delivers grim news. Another young woman was abducted under the cover of darkness just last night. She passes him a file containing the victim's details, and as he scans the pages, his eyes widen in sudden, sharp recognition. He stares at the portrait of Yulia, the memory of their brief meeting flashing through his mind as her name echoes in his thoughts. A cold sweat breaks across his brow as the reality sinks in. The girl he spoke with only yesterday is now among the missing. Sensing his distress, the captain places a hand on his shoulder and offers a reassuring word, promising the full support of the knights. He offers a faint, grateful smile in return. He then reveals that he has a plan forming, catching her interest as he explains there is something they can do. Pointing to the records, he notes a specific mark found on a victim's hand and mentions the existence of a young survivor who might hold the key. With a newfound resolve, he proposes setting a trap to lure the kidnapper out into the open, determined to find the missing girl. Elsewhere, the quiet of the night is broken only by the soft footsteps of the priest as he moves through the dim corridors of the orphanage while the children sleep. He continues his rounds, his expression unreadable as he passes through the arched doorways of the silent building, seemingly unaware of any watchful eyes. He is approached by a hesitant young woman, her face obscured by a deep hood as she softly calls out for his attention. Turning toward her, the priest asks what has brought her there, only to be met with a startling sight as she reveals a dark, unsettling mark etched into the skin of her hand. He leans in closer to examine the blemish, inquiring how long it has been there, to which he explains it only appeared after her recent arrival in the royal capital. Adjusting his glasses with a grim expression, he delivers a chilling diagnosis, labeling the mark a demon's curse, a revelation that leaves the girl trembling in fear. Seeing her distress, he offers a reassuring word, promising to handle the matter through prayer without requesting any payment, prompting her to plead for his help with desperate gratitude. With the agreement made, he gestures for her to follow him deeper into the quiet halls of the building, and she complies without hesitation. They eventually settle into a private room, where he prepares a cup of tea, suggesting that she first relax and clear her mind before they begin their counseling session. She takes a sip, noting the pleasant aroma and the delicious taste of the brew, while he sits across from her, watching her every move with a steady, unreadable gaze. Moments later, a sudden wave of lightheadedness washes over her, and she finds herself swaying as her vision begins to blur and her strength fails. Clinging to her head in confusion, she struggles to understand why her senses are failing her, while the priest remains perfectly still, calmly asking if something is the matter. He stands over the fallen girl, watching as the massive, white tail of the spirit wolf retreats after delivering a heavy blow. A cold question escapes his lips as he wonders aloud if the impact was enough to end her life. He finds her still breathing but deeply unconscious, so he lifts her small frame and carries her through a doorway, descending into the dark, damp depths of the building. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, he enters a secluded storage cellar and unceremoniously leaves her on the floor amidst stacks of crates and heavy barrels. Looking down at his prize, he begins to coil a thick rope, his eyes devoid of any priestly compassion as he prepares to secure his captive while she remains trapped in a drug-induced slumber. Dan leans over the seemingly unconscious Yulia, his expression a mix of concern and hidden intent. Suddenly, her eyes snap open, a sharp, knowing smirk playing on her lips that catches him completely off guard. He recoils in sheer terror as Kagaya suddenly manifests behind him, her presence radiating a cold, lethal aura. She mocks his pathetic attempt to bind her, calling him a shameless soul for even trying such a cowardly tactic. Stumbling back, he is gripped by a frantic confusion, stammering about how it should be impossible for her to be awake. He had been certain the sleeping medication he administered would have taken effect by now. She casually holds up the small vial of medicine, a mocking glint in her eyes as she asks if this was the substance he was counting on to subdue her. With a flick of her wrist, she discards the container, taunting him by claiming it tasted quite good even though she never actually swallowed a drop. He can only stare in mounting dread as his plan crumbles before him. She declares that bad people deserve a fitting punishment, her hand reaching out as she prepares to unleash her power. He desperately tries to call out for her to wait, but his pleas are ignored as she moves to end the confrontation. A sudden, violent force erupts, sending him tumbling through the air as the ground beneath him shatters from the sheer impact of her strike. He hits the floor hard, gasping for breath as he looks up in shock, realizing that his deception has been thoroughly exposed. Silva stands tall over the fallen priest, his expression stern and uncompromising as he announces that he is taking the man into custody. Kaguya stands just behind him, her task of drawing out the traitor complete. They look down at the defeated man, Silva remarking on Kaguya's impressive ability to play the part of a weak woman so convincingly that even a seasoned schemer like Dan was fooled. He watches as Charles makes a dramatic display, claiming her heart is that of a fragile maiden and can only offer a weary, slightly amused smile at her antics. Turning his attention back to the matter at hand, he stands over the kneeling priest as Dan, his voice trembling, asks how he could have possibly known to be suspicious of him. The young guard reflects on the nature of the recent attacks, noting that while vampires usually drain their victims dry, a single young girl had been left alive as a survivor. He leans in closer to the captive, suggesting that perhaps the culprit felt a flicker of mercy for a child, or maybe they had a personal reason, like having a child of their own, that sparked a moment of misplaced sympathy. He admits that while that was a significant clue, it wasn't the only reason his suspicions were piqued, even as Dan questions if that alone was enough to condemn him. He continues his explanation, pointing out another glaring inconsistency: the almost complete lack of any struggle or traces left behind by the supposed kidnapper. With a sharp, focused gaze, he explains that the lack of witnesses and the way the victims seemed to walk right into the vampire's clutches suggested they went willingly, led by someone they trusted. He posits that if a man of the cloth told the townspeople he was performing a ritual to cleanse a curse, they would follow him into the darkness without a single doubt in their minds. Continuing his breakdown of the scheme, he describes how easy it would be to manipulate those who had suddenly developed mysterious bruises, all while Kaguya watches with a knowing smirk. He watches as the realization hits the priest like a physical blow, Dan's eyes widening in shock as he is branded a fraud and his entire deception is finally laid bare. Silva stands over the empty storage area, his voice heavy as he explains that the marked women were kept here until they were consumed. He turns his gaze toward Dan, whose face is slick with sweat and etched with a guilt he cannot hide. Gripping the priest's arm firmly, the young guard suppresses a surge of violent intent, deciding instead to escort him to the night order for formal questioning. Before they move, he discreetly passes a slip of paper to the man, warning him to remain silent so the children nearby don't witness the arrest. As the priest stares at the message, he reads the silent promise that his predicament is understood and that he must cooperate to find safety. Later, within the stone corridors of the headquarters, Elda concludes the initial inquiry, noting with frustration that the man continues to claim sole responsibility for the crimes. Standing before her, Silva voices his skepticism, proposing that the priest is merely a pawn being coerced by a vampire through threats against the orphans. He recalls their first encounter, noting how the man flinched at the mention of the undead, yet still managed to offer cryptic clues about their subordinates. This leads him to believe the priest's actions were a desperate, silent cry for rescue from an impossible situation. Listening intently, Kaguya acknowledges the logic, realizing that a written plea was the only way to bypass the constant surveillance of a vampiric master. She listens as Silva explains his deduction. The vampire avoided her despite her disguise, suggesting they're being monitored by someone who knows their true identities. Impressed by his insight, the swordswoman praises him, calling him a sharp-witted detective for piecing together the enemy's surveillance. As the gravity of the situation sinks in, the night captain coughs, her expression darkening as the guard reveals the vampire has already claimed over 10 victims. The captain's resolve hardens. She notes the creature's power is surging and warns that leaving it unchecked will only lead to more bloodshed. Meanwhile, the young guard's mind races as he connects the dots, realizing this vampire outbreak perfectly aligns with the first major event of the Academy's training exercises. He understands the stakes. If a high-level demon attack coincides with this vampire threat, the aspiring heroes will be defenseless, prompting him to turn to his ally with a desperate plan. Approaching her with a serious gaze, he admits there's a task that only she is capable of handling, piquing her interest. Elsewhere, beneath the cold glow of a full moon, the Tower of the Moon looms over the landscape as the young traveler, Yulia, gazes up at its heights. Back with the group, the swordswoman chuckles to herself, finding it amusing that the guard would ask her to look after his sweetheart in his absence. She eventually finds the girl, who recalls the guard's advice to seek out this powerful warrior if she truly wishes to grow stronger. She leans in close, a predatory gleam dancing in her eyes as she promises to etch every lesson into her new pupil's very being. With a sharp, unsettling grin, she warns the girl to ensure she doesn't perish during the ordeal. Facing this overwhelming intensity, the young traveler can only offer a hesitant but resolute acceptance, placing her fate in the warrior's hands. The elite knight captain, Elda, stands tall before the assembled hero candidates, her voice ringing out as she expresses the Knight Order's formal respect for their dedication and the path they have chosen. As she speaks, Silva adjusts his gear, his mind focused on the gravity of the upcoming practical training exercise. Not far from him, Charles approaches Alan with a look of concern, questioning why he stands alone and demanding to know what has happened to the rest of his party members. Her inquiry is cut short by Kaguya, who interjects with a sharp, dismissive tone, declaring that Charles is no longer considered a member of their group and has no right to pry. Despite the interruption, she continues to press Alan, questioning the wisdom of his decision to participate in a monster-slaying exercise alone when the dangers are so high. She continues to look at him expectantly, wondering if he truly intends to leave things as they are between them. While they argue, Silva suddenly feels a prickle of unease, sensing a hostile gaze. He turns to find Kaguya glaring at him, her thoughts clearly filled with contempt for a mere gate guard. He chooses to ignore this silent provocation, turning his attention back to the mission as the group prepares to move out. His focus shifts to the intensity of Kaguya's presence, whose strength is recognized as being at the pinnacle of the student body, leading to the official instruction for her to directly oversee the guidance of Charles and the others during the trial. Following this directive, the group gathers at the entrance of the Forest of Trials, where they are warned that the woods harbor dangerous rank 3 and 4 monsters, with even greater threats potentially lurking deeper within. He stands among the other candidates as the examiner's voice booms across the clearing, announcing that Level 1 demons have been released into the training grounds. The armored official continues his stern warning, emphasizing that while guards are stationed nearby for protection, any candidate fearing for their life must signal for immediate rescue. Following the initial briefing, the focus shifts to the elite captain, who is requested to provide the specific details of the upcoming exercise. She steps forward, explaining that the designated combat zone has been strictly partitioned by a magical barrier maintained by the Academy's mages. This shimmering wall of energy stretches over the dense canopy, marked by physical stakes that serve as a final warning for students not to stray into the untamed wilds beyond. The captain further clarifies that their performance will be judged solely on the number of demonic entities they successfully neutralize within these boundaries, reminding everyone to remain vigilant. With a sharp command, she officially commences the trial, sending the candidates sprinting into the shadows of the forest. As the crowd disperses, Alan suddenly calls out to Charles, causing her to pause and look back with a questioning glance. He approaches her, admitting that his previous plan to go it alone was foolish and asking for a moment of her time. Looking her in the eye, the young man makes a sincere plea to reform their party, vowing to correct his past mistakes if she will only give him another chance. He calls out to Charles with desperate sincerity, vowing to cherish her and protect her even at the cost of his own life. However, his words seem to fall on deaf ears as she looks away, her expression hardening. To her, the idea of being a damsel in distress is exhausting. She is determined to be the master of her own safety. Despite his pleas, she continues her trek into the dense woods, firmly commanding him to stop following her since she has her own objectives to fulfill. He remains undeterred, his voice echoing through the trees as he begs her to wait. As she quickens her pace through the undergrowth, he struggles to keep up, insisting that their conversation is far from over. Suddenly, something in the environment catches her attention, causing her to halt in surprise. Charles Orland suddenly appears, calling out to a woman she identifies as Miss Liba and questioning her presence. Beside Charles, Alan's eyes widen as he spots a distinct mark on Miss Liba's hand, realizing with alarm that it is the thrall's mark Silva had warned them about. She directly accuses Miss Liba, asking if she has been turned into a vampire thrall. Charles explains that Silva had told her it was possible a mole, turned into a thrall, would allow demons to attack them during their combat practicals. With a somber expression, Miss Liba remains silent as Charles connects the pieces, concluding aloud that she must have been the mole all along. As the realization dawns, the protective barrier around them begins to crack and shatter. Seeing dark energy emanating from Miss Liba, Alan desperately pleads with her to stop, threatening to strike her down if she continues. However, a dark hand closes into a fist, a sign that his plea is futile. Suddenly, a massive, muscular demon materializes from the shadows, seizing Charles from behind. The creature smirks, declaring that the woman they knew as Miss Liba is nothing but a puppet. He elaborates that the puppet's sole purpose was to create a hole in the barrier for them. With her role fulfilled, he contemptuously tosses Charles aside like trash. Horrified, Alan can only cry out Miss Liba's name. Facing the new threat, Alan assumes it is a level 1 demon assigned for the practicals. He steels his resolve, thinking that if he can defeat the demon and protect Charles, he might still be able to save Miss Liba. With a roar, he channels his power, shouting, "You cursed demon, take this." Lightning slash. The electrical attack blasts forward but is effortlessly blocked by the demon. Alan grimaces, noting that while the slash should be powerful enough to take down a level 1 demon, it possesses less firepower than his soulbound technique. The demon looks down, utterly unimpressed. "Hey now," he scoffs, "did you seriously think you could beat me with this weak attack? Don't lump me with level 1 fodder." He grins with chilling confidence, revealing the truth of the situation. "You see, I'm level 3. I'm on a whole other level." He cracks his knuckles, a menacing grin spreading across his face. He declares that he will teach them his name so they can take it to the afterlife. He is Garrett, the one who will crush all heroes. Hearing this, Alan recoils in shock, realizing he's facing a level 3 demon, a foe far stronger than he was led to believe. He glances back toward Charles. Meanwhile, the night trainee, possessed by the vampire, steps forward and addresses the demon, demanding he tell her something. She continues her interrogation, stating her deduction. Since Garrett mentioned controlling Miss Liba, it must mean he is working with the vampire and following his orders. With her logic laid bare, she presses the point, demanding to know the vampire's current location. Her sudden questioning catches both Garrett and Alan by surprise. Garrett's expression darkens as he glares at the woman, demanding to know where she learned about vampires. She coolly replies that she is under no obligation to tell him. Her defiance seems to amuse and anger him. His fist begins to glow with an immense, crackling energy. From a distance, Alan observes the incredible display of magic power, while the thrall remains impassive. The demon roars that he has no clue how they learned about the plan, but he'll be damned if he lets it go off course. He declares his intention to kill them all right there. Beside Alan, Charles watches with concern. Shaking off a brief moment of fear, Alan's resolve hardens. He thinks to himself that it doesn't matter if the opponent is level 3, he will protect Charles. With a determined cry, he charges forward. His sword strikes Garrett's forearm, but clangs against it, as if hitting solid rock. Garrett smirks, remarking on the boy's guts. Alan stares in disbelief, realizing his opponent's arm is as tough as stone. Leaping back, Alan realizes he must find a weak spot. Garrett laughs, mocking the feeble attack as he lunges with a powerful punch. But as the blow closes in, Alan spots an opening and turns, shouting, "Got you!" He brought his blade down with a ferocious cry, aiming for the demon's neck. The sword struck true, slashing across Garrett's flesh. But the impact was a dull thud, not the clean cut he expected. Garrett turned, a mocking grin spreading across his face as he asked if Alan still failed to comprehend. The demon boasted that his mighty body, fortified with mana, possessed no weakness at all. The force of the rebound sent Alan's sword flying from his grasp, skittering uselessly across the dusty ground. Looming over his disarmed opponent, Garrett declared that the appetizer was finished. His attention then shifted. Licking his lips with predatory hunger, he announced it was time for the main dish, his gaze falling upon a young girl, Charles, standing some distance away. A soft glow began to emanate from Charles's body. She had known from the very beginning that this demon was miles stronger than Alan. In the distance, Garrett beckoned her forward, roaring that he would take her small, frail body and pummel it into minced meat. She stood her ground, unflinching, and dared him to try. With her hand outstretched, she began an incantation, calling for her master to appear. A glowing sigil blazed to life on the ground before her as she summoned the Fenrir wolf. This confrontation was a pivotal moment, recorded in the annals of history. The record states that the students were under attack by a level 3 threat. The text within the book describes the assault by monsters, noting that this particular battle would go down in history as the first ever battle of the hero Charles. With a determined expression, Charles Orland begins an incantation, her hand held in a specific gesture. She calls out for her master's servant, the Fenrir wolf, to appear before her. In an instant, the great Fenrir wolf, Ruru, materializes beside her in the clearing. Across the way, the muscular demon watches their arrival. He smirks, finding her aptitude for commanding spirits to be merely amusing. With a shout, he lunges forward, closing the distance in a blur of motion. His punch misses, cracking the earth where they once stood as he declares them too slow. Now mounted on Ruru's back, Charles looks back and retorts that his pathetically slow attack will never catch them. The demon scoffs, asking if she truly believes she can win by simply running away. Her expression hardens as she calls out her companion's name. With resolve, she states that she never said she was running. At her unspoken command, Ruru leaps toward the demon, who laughs boisterously, calling the attack far too weak. Charles watches, conceding to herself that Ruru alone will not be able to inflict any damage. The demon proves her right, swatting the wolf aside with a powerful blow. He boasts that a single mangy mutt has no chance of defeating him. As he gloats, a massive, clawed hand formed of pure shadow erupts from behind him, striking him squarely in the back. The demon cries out in pain and surprise. Her eyes narrow with focus. She had never claimed she could only command a single elemental spirit. She stood her ground, flanked by her 2 summons, the Fenrir wolf, Ruru, and a newly revealed dark, crow-like elemental. She had achieved a dual summon, presenting an imposing front, her gaze fixed on the demon, who clutched his wounded back. She reminded him of his boast about having no weakness, then revealed that her 8-span crow, which she calls Crowy, possessed a special ability to find one. As she spoke, she commanded Crowy to use its guiding fire to show her his weakness. A small, ethereal flame immediately ignited on the demon's chest, marking him. With the target marked, she confidently stated that he would be unable to evade her next strike. This, she explained, was Crowy's primary power, true aim. The demon grunted, still off balance from the initial attack. He scoffed, dismissing the attack as weak and boasting that such insignificant damage would never be enough to defeat him. Unfazed, Charles resolved to simply continue the assault until he was brought down. Enraged by what he called her stupid little tricks, the demon lunged forward, swinging his fists wildly. His blows passed through empty air as Charles deftly evaded him. He then gathered his strength, unleashing a drumming fist that slammed into the earth with explosive force. Charles cried out for Ruru as the resulting shockwave blasted them both backward. Sent flying by the blast, she noted the sheer power contained in the shockwave alone, knowing a direct hit would be catastrophic. She admitted to herself that while she would have liked to prolong the battle, she could not afford to do so. The demon, meanwhile, braced himself, his patience worn thin. He announced his intention to end the fight for real with his very next attack. Suddenly, the guiding flame on his chest flared and began to spread across his entire body. Startled, Charles realized its meaning. The demon was abandoning all defense, preparing to stake everything on his own offensive. She trembled, but her wolf companion, Ruru, stood steadfastly beside her, offering silent support. Steeling herself, she told Ruru they would not run from this strike, as she had promised to fight until the very end. Ruru nudged her reassuringly. Nearby, Silva voiced his concern, asking if she was certain, since the demon's attack seemed practical and direct. He admitted that while it was merely his conjecture, he had a duty to pursue the vampires, but also felt a strong desire to protect her. Charles, however, reassured him, stating that she would be fighting too and that he shouldn't worry. She looked back at him with resolve, adding that it wouldn't do for her to be protected all the time. A confident smile spread across her face as she declared her ambition. She would become a hero, and a hero's job is to fight demons. In response, Silva gave her a warm smile and a thumbs up. He wished her luck, stating with conviction that he absolutely believed she would make a great hero. His words clearly moved her. Bolstered by his belief, her expression hardened with focus. She realized that if the demon truly didn't intend to lower its guard, this would be her greatest chance. As the demon's massive fist plunged toward her, she shouted a command, directing her crow summon, Crowy, straight into the path of the attack. The demon let out a booming laugh, mocking her tactic as far too shallow. He roared that she was dead meat, his drumming fist just an instant from impact, as Charles's eyes widened in apparent surprise. But his fist stopped dead, hovering just before her face, halted by an unseen power. Looking up at the stunned demon, she calmly declared, "It's over for you." The unseen force holding the demon's fist was a power granted by another. As Finra had explained, his true aim ability could also bestow effects upon his companion's attacks, not just his own. The effect was devastating. The demon roared in agony as the invisible power crushed both of his eyes. With her opponent blinded, Charles calmly stated that he had no way to win and demanded he provide information about the vampires. He, however, had one last resort. Fumbling for a small vial, the demon muttered with disgust about having to rely on the power of vampires. With a defiant cry of, "So be it," he swallowed the contents as Charles watched, questioning what it was. Instantly, a surge of power coursed through the demon's body. His mana flared to an incredible new level, and Charles could only watch in alarm as his strength increased exponentially. He sneered, surprised that the living blood of a human could grant him such power. With a single, explosive blow, he sent Charles hurtling backward, the impact kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. As the chaos of the renewed battle unfolded, Charles's summon, Crowy, flew to safety, carrying the unconscious Finra away from the danger. The commotion stirred another person nearby. Lying amidst the rubble, Rachel Forzert slowly opened her eyes, dazed and confused, questioning what on earth had just happened. Back in the heart of the fight, Charles was on the ground and at the demon's mercy. Looking up at her towering foe, she cried out for her summon. In an instant, Crowy was by her side, ready to defend her. The demon looked down on her with a mix of respect and malice. He acknowledged her as a formidable foe, admitting he would have lost without the power of the blood. But with that power now his, he raised a massive fist, roaring a vow that all heroes would be dead. His fist paused. Instead of terror, he saw a calm smile on Charles's face. He scoffed, asking if fear had driven her mad. She simply thanked him, explaining that because of this fight, she had learned that she, too, could grow even stronger. Her calm resolve unbroken, she declares that she will defeat him without fail this time, even if he resorts to another cheap trick. Before he can respond, the ground begins to rumble violently. The demon looks around in confusion, wondering at the source of the disturbance. In the distance, a massive barrier of light slams down from the sky, striking the forest with immense force. The demon stares in shock, recognizing the phenomenon as a barrier. From high above, a new voice addresses Charles as her apprentice, admiring the sturdy toy below. With a pained expression, Charles reluctantly agrees to let her new master have him. The newcomer, Lady Kagaya, smiles with predatory delight. Accepting the offer, she declares that she won't hold back and ponders aloud how she should toy with it. Kagaya descends from above, her ornate robes billowing around her. On the ground, Charles Orland looks up, remarking that Kagaya is late. With a confident smile, Kagaya retorts that the main attraction always arrives late and declares she will crush this foe with her own fists. The muscular demon, Garrett, watches Kagaya approach, a sneer on his face. He recognizes her, identifying her as the infamous special hero. In a recent memory, The hooded assassin warns Garrett to be careful, as Kagaya, the natural enemy of the demon race, is in the capital. When Garrett questions the warning, the assassin presents a small vial, assuring him that with it, her presence will not be a problem. Returning to the present, Garrett laughs boisterously, claiming it makes no difference how many little girls appear. He will simply kill them both. Kagaya looks down at him with an air of pity, remarking how sad it is that he is so unaware of his own limitations. Her comment leaves Garrett momentarily confused. With a casual flick of her finger, Kagaya unleashes a wave of force. The demon is violently thrown backward, crying out in agony as the invisible blow slams into him. She then turns to Charles, telling her to rest while she goes to play for a bit. Charles can only watch, stunned into silence. In a flash, Kagaya leaps away, disappearing into the trees in pursuit of the demon. Charles watches her go, her mind reeling. She cannot believe that Kagaya defeated that powerful demon so easily. Elsewhere, Garrett coughs up blood, clutching the massive invisible wound on his chest. He wonders what kind of attack that was, realizing with dawning horror that he only survived because he had recently drunk blood. His eyes widen in fury and disbelief. Kagaya lands softly on the forest floor, her boots barely making a sound on the scattered leaves as she prepares for the next phase of the confrontation. She lands lightly on the demon's enormous fist, her weight nothing to him. With a serene smile, she remarks that he is indeed sturdy, which is a relief. Enraged, Garrett snarls, warning the little girl not to look down on him. Rising into the air, she dismisses his attack as crude, adding that she has no fondness for rough men. The demon, baffled, demands to know what she is and if this is some kind of magic. She offers to explain, clarifying that she isn't flying, she's simply falling. As she ascends towards the sky, she elaborates that her ability is gravity magic. She can manipulate the direction and magnitude of gravity at will. By simply adjusting the gravity affecting her own body, floating becomes an easy task. She smiles, indicating this is the result. She then taunts him from her high vantage point, asking what he will do now that his vaunted fists cannot reach her. The demon can only growl in frustration. In a show of brute force, he rips an entire tree from the ground and hurls it toward her with a furious roar. The projectile hurtles towards her, but she calmly declares it a useless gesture. She explains that she can also control the direction in which the tree falls. Just as she says, the massive trunk halts its ascent and begins to plummet back towards its source, leaving the demon staring in shock. A wide, almost manic grin spreads across her face as she declares that it's only proper to return a gift. Below, the demon can only utter a confused "what?" as the shadow of the tree falls over him. The tree smashes down with immense force, crushing him beneath its weight. From above, she wonders aloud if this will be enough to suffice. He can only scream in agony as the immense weight of the redirected projectile crushes him into the earth. Drifting down towards the pinned and bleeding demon, she remarks again on how truly sturdy he is. Garrett, furious and humiliated, snarls at her for daring to toy with him. She finds his complaint peculiar, pointing out that toys are, by their very nature, meant to be played with. She watches the demon Garrett struggle, his mind reeling. He questions if she sees the war with the demon race as a mere game, a horrifying realization dawning that he will be killed if this continues. Meanwhile, Kagaya's own interest begins to wane as she feels she is growing bored. The immense pressure forces him to his knees, his body trembling as he grunts against the invisible weight. Her expression twists into a sinister smile as she formally names her technique, Gravity Field, Moonlight Domain. In response, a massive sphere of pure gravitational force manifests in the air, looming ominously over the terrified demon. Kagaya explains that within her Moonlight Domain, the gravity of the space is hers to command. She reveals that from the moment he entered her territory, the gravity affecting him was increased tenfold. She declares that he is nothing more than her toy as the crushing force slams him face first into the ground. He can only let out an agonized scream. Pinned and bleeding, he snarls a final warning, telling her not to get cocky. He claims that even if she defeats him, the vampire's plan will not be thwarted. She leans in with a chillingly sweet smile, mockingly asking if that was his last will and testament, and thanks him for the information. Her taunt is cut short as a voice calls out her name. From the edge of the woods, the knight Captain Elda emerges, her eyes wide with shock. She stares at the scene, unable to comprehend what has happened. In the distance, Kagaya casually remarks that she has no more interest in a broken toy. She stood before Kagaya, her usual confidence gone. Humbled by the display of power, she asked quietly, "How can I become as strong as you?" Kagaya's response was blunt, delivered with a dismissive smile. "It's impossible," she stated. "You can never catch up to me." She then glanced at Elda's stunned expression, her smile widening slightly. "What's with that face?" she teased, as the knight stood silently amidst the wreckage, looking utterly dejected. The knight bit her lip, a wave of frustration and inadequacy washing over her as she held back her emotions. Seeing her distress, Kagaya offered a small concession. "Well, even if you can't catch up to me," she began, "you might be able to get close." She encouraged Elda to have more confidence, explaining that with her summons, she already possessed the mobility, reconnaissance, and attack power to handle most party roles by herself. Despite the praise, Elda's resolve hardened. She knew it still wasn't enough. "Kaguya," she pleaded, "please continue to train me." Kaguya seemed taken aback by the request. "Sorry, but there's nothing more I can teach you," she replied with a shrug. She explained that her own power was simply a fluke, a chance adaptation to the moon's magic. Elda could only stare in disbelief. She elaborated, pointing out that her magic and Elda's spirit magic are fundamentally different from the ground up. Elda had to agree. Kaguya then leaned in conspiratorially, admitting with a grin that during their prior training, she had only taught her the barest of fundamentals. She remains unconvinced, her expression souring as Kaguya leans in with a teasing smile. Kaguya suggests that if Elda truly wishes to become stronger, she would be better off relying on Kaguya's husband. Elda flatly reminds her that the man in question is not, in fact, her husband. Despite the dismissal, Kaguya begins walking through a wooded area, announcing that it's time for her to go and observe. She declares that she simply cannot miss the chance to see her beloved husband in all his heroic glory. She glances back over her shoulder, asking Elda if she will be joining her. Elda confirms with a simple of course. As Kaguya leaps ahead, she cheerfully remarks that their union is an inevitability. As they proceed, Kaguya suddenly halts. She senses something in the distance, noting that she can feel two strong sources of magical power coming from a specific direction. The scene shifts to one of those sources, Alan. A dark, intricate marking is visible on the back of his hand as he grips his unique, jagged sword. He internally laments that he is in a hurry, driven by the need to go and kill the heroes. He turns his back on a fallen figure, offering a curt "see ya" as he walks away. The defeated figure is revealed to be the gate guard, Silva, who sits slumped and bleeding against a tree, his own sword shattered nearby. Alan dismisses him with a final thought, a mere mob soldier.